Please don't take
had
him
no
too.
mercy for children. 9-year-old Emma knew this truth as she stumbled across the burning sand, her little brother, Noah's weight growing heavier with each step. The sun overhead was a furnace of pure malice, turning the endless wasteland into a shimmering hell that stretched beyond hope itself. 4 days. 4 days since the wagon accident. 4 days since Mama and Papa had gone silent forever. Noah's breathing had become shallow, barely a whisper against her shoulder. His 5-year-old body was so light now, like a bird made of hollow bones and fading dreams. Emma's cracked lips moved in a silent prayer she'd repeated 1,000 times since that terrible morning when their world had shattered. "Please," she whispered to the merciless sky, "please don't take him too." The promise she'd made haunted her with every labored step. Mama's last words gasped through blood-stained lips as the overturned wagon creaked its death song. "Protect your brother, Emma. Promise me." And Emma had promised, even as Papa's hand grew cold in hers, even as the desert sun began its slow murder of everything she loved. She'd tried everything a 9-year-old could think of, following animal tracks that led nowhere, rationing their single canteen until it ran dry yesterday morning, singing the lullabies Mama used to sing, though her throat felt like sandpaper scraping against stone. She'd even tried to catch a lizard with her bare hands, thinking maybe its blood could give Noah strength. But the desert kept its creatures hidden, hoarding life while stealing theirs drop by precious drop. Noah hadn't opened his eyes since dawn. His skin had taken on a grayish tinge that made Emma's heart pound with terror she couldn't name. She knew what death looked like now. She'd seen it claim. Mama and Papa watched it settle over their faces like a veil. She couldn't let it take Noah too. She wouldn't. "Remember the ranch, Noah," she said, her voice cracking like dried leather. "Remember how Papa said we'd have horses, black ones and brown ones, and maybe even a spotted one just for you?" No response. Just that terrible shallow breathing that seemed to grow quieter with each passing moment. Emma's knees buckled, sending them both tumbling into the sand beside a jagged rock formation that offered a sliver of shade. She pulled Noah against her chest, feeling for his heartbeat. Still there, but so faint, like a butterfly trapped under glass. The tears that came surprised her. She thought she'd cried them all out by the second day, when the last of their water had dwindled to nothing. But here they were hot and stinging, carving clean tracks through the dirt and dried blood on her cheeks. "I'm sorry, Mama," she sobbed, rocking Noah's still form. "I'm so sorry. I tried so hard." The desert wind picked up, sending sand swirling around them like a burial shroud. Emma closed her eyes, ready to join her parents, ready to stop fighting the inevitable. At least they'd be together again. At least Noah wouldn't die alone. That's when she heard it. The sound that didn't belong in this place of death and silence. Hoofbeats. At first, Emma thought she was hallucinating. Desert mirages were cruel things Papa had warned her once. They showed you what you wanted most right before they disappeared like smoke. But the sound grew louder, steadier, real. She forced her eyes open, squinting against the brutal sun. A figure on horseback materialized from the heat shimmer, moving toward them with purpose. The rider was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a wide-brimmed hat that cast his face in shadow. He rode like someone who belonged to this harsh land, who knew its secrets and survived its cruelties. "Please," Emma tried to call out, but her voice was gone, stolen by thirst and exhaustion. She raised one trembling hand, the universal gesture of the desperate. The rider saw them. He spurred his horse faster, closing the distance in moments that felt like hours. When he dismounted, Emma saw him clearly for the first time. Weathered face, kind eyes, the color of storm clouds, hands scarred from years of hard work. He looked like safety. He looked like hope. "Lord, have mercy," the man breathed, kneeling beside them. His voice was deep, gravelly, like it had been seasoned by the same desert that was killing them. "How long you been out here, little one?" Emma tried to answer, but only a croak emerged. The man didn't wait for words. He pulled a canteen from his saddle, uncapping it with practiced efficiency. "Easy now," he said, tilting water onto Emma's lips. Just a few drops at first, then a small sip. It was the sweetest thing she'd ever tasted, like liquid life itself. "Too much too fast will make you sick." Emma pushed the canteen toward Noah. "Him first, please." "My brother." The man's expression softened. He carefully lifted Noah's head, dripping water onto the boy's cracked lips. For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then Noah coughed, sputtered, his eyes fluttering open for just a second before closing again. "He's alive," the man said, and Emma collapsed with relief. "But barely. We need to get him help fast." He looked at Emma with those storm cloud eyes. "Can you ride?" Emma nodded, though she wasn't sure her body would cooperate. The man lifted Noah like he weighed nothing, cradling him with surprising gentleness. Then he helped Emma onto his horse, a massive black stallion that stood patient as stone. He handed Noah up to her, making sure she had a secure hold before mounting behind them. "Name's Samuel Carter," he said, wrapping one strong arm around them both to take the reins. "You're safe now, both of you." As the horse began to move, carrying them away from their desert grave, Emma felt something she hadn't felt in 4 days. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the promise of it. She held Noah tighter, feeling his chest rise and fall against hers, and whispered the words she'd been too afraid to say. "We're going to live, Noah. We're going to live." Behind them, the desert stretched on, endless and uncaring. But ahead, somewhere beyond the shimmering horizon, salvation waited. Emma didn't know it yet, but this moment, this rescue, would be the first page of a story about family forged not by blood, but by choice, by love, by the simple act of one human being refusing to let another perish alone. The horses' hooves beat a steady rhythm against the sand, carrying them toward a future none of them could imagine. Not Samuel Carter, the lonely cowboy who'd lost everything. Not Emma, the girl who'd kept her promise. And not little Noah, fighting for life in his sister's arms. The desert had taken their parents, their past, their certainty. But it had also given them this a chance meeting that would transform 3 broken souls into something whole. Something like family. Something like home. Samuel Carter's ranch sat like a lonely monument to better days 15 miles outside the town of Silver Creek, where the desert gradually surrendered to grassland and hope seemed possible again. It was a good spread, 200 acres of decent grazing land, with a creek that ran year-round even in the driest summers. The kind of place that should have been filled with life, laughter, the chaos of family. Instead, it stood quiet as a held breath, waiting for something that never came. The house itself was built solid, made from logs Samuel had cut and fitted himself 8 years ago, back when dreams were things you could hold in your hands and shape into reality. 2 stories with a wide porch that wrapped around 3 sides, offering shade in summer and shelter in winter. Inside, 6 rooms that echoed with emptiness despite the careful touches that suggested a woman's hand. Gingham curtains at the windows, a braided rug before the fireplace, a rocking chair that nobody rocked in anymore. Samuel guided his horse toward the barn, Emma still clutching Noah's unconscious form. Through the kitchen window, he could see Margaret moving about in that mechanical way she'd adopted 6 months ago, going through the motions of living without actually being alive. He knew she had heard them coming. Margaret heard everything these days existed in a state of constant vigilance, as if staying alert enough might somehow prevent another loss. "Margaret!" He called out, his voice carrying across the yard. "Got some young ones here, need help." The kitchen door opened, and Margaret Carter stepped onto the porch. She was 34 years old, but looked older, grief having carved premature lines around her green eyes and painted silver into her auburn hair. She'd been beautiful, once the kind of woman who turned heads at church socials and made bachelor cowboys write bad poetry. She was still beautiful, Samuel thought, but in the way a winter landscape was beautiful. distant, untouchable, frozen. Margaret's eyes found the children, and something flickered across her face. Not quite emotion, but the ghost of it. "How bad?" "Bad enough," Samuel said, dismounting carefully. "Found them out in the Devil's Backbone. 4 days in the desert, they said. The boys barely hanging on." Margaret stood frozen for a moment, her hands gripping her apron. Samuel knew what she was thinking. He could see it in the way her shoulders tensed, the way her jaw set hard against the possibility of caring. They'd had this conversation without words a dozen times since Benjamin died. No more hurt, no more risk, no more opening their hearts just to have them shattered again. "Margaret," Samuel said softly, "they'll die without help." "Then take them to town," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Doc Morrison's in Tucson till Thursday. You know that." Samuel adjusted Noah in his arms, and the boy's head lolled back, revealing his pale face, sunburned and peaceful in unconsciousness. He looked younger than his 5 years, fragile as spun glass. Emma slid down from the horse on her own, though her legs buckled and she had to grab the saddle to stay upright. "Please, ma'am," she said, her voice raw but determined. "I know you don't know us. I know we're nothing to you, but my brother, he's all I got left. Please." Margaret's composure cracked just slightly. Perhaps it was the girl's dignity, the way she stood there swaying but refusing to fall. Or maybe it was the familiar desperation in her voice, the same desperation Margaret had felt, watching Benjamin's fever climb higher and higher despite everything they did. "Bring them inside," Margaret said, finally turning sharply back to the house. "The boy goes in Benjamin's room. It's coolest faces north." Samuel and Emma exchanged glances. Benjamin's room had been sealed like a tomb since the funeral, neither Samuel nor Margaret able to bear entering it. The fact that Margaret was opening it now meant something, though Samuel wasn't sure what. They followed her inside through the kitchen that smelled of bread and sorrow, up the narrow stairs that creaked a familiar welcome. Margaret pushed open the door to Benjamin's room, and time seemed to hold its breath. Everything was exactly as it had been 6 months ago. The small bed with its blue quilt that Margaret had sewn while pregnant, dreaming of the son who would sleep beneath it. The shelf of carved wooden animals that Samuel had made one for each birthday. Bears and horses and dogs, and one ambitious attempt at an elephant. The slate with Benjamin's last arithmetic lesson still chalked across it, the numbers crooked but earnest. Margaret pulled back the quilt with sharp, efficient movements, but Samuel saw her hands tremble. "Put him here." Samuel laid Noah down gently, and the boy seemed to sink into the mattress, as if his small body had been waiting for something soft, something safe. Margaret immediately began working her movements, sure despite her emotional distance. She'd nursed enough ranch injuries and childhood ailments to know what to do. "Emma, that's your name?" Margaret asked without looking at the girl. "When did you last eat?" "We found some berries yesterday, maybe the day before. They made Noah sick." "And water. Ran out yesterday morning." Margaret nodded, processing this information with clinical detachment. "Samuel, start heating water. Not too hot. We need to cool him down gradually and get fluids in him. The girl needs food, but nothing heavy. Broth first." As Samuel left to follow orders, Emma swayed again, and Margaret caught her arm. For a moment they stood there, the grieving woman and the desperate child connected by touch and necessity. "You did good," Margaret said quietly. "Keeping him alive this long, that took courage." "I promised Mama," Emma whispered, right before I promised I'd protect him." Margaret's breath hitched. She knew about promises to the dying. She'd made her own to Benjamin, promised him he'd get better, promised him they'd go fishing when the fever broke, promised him anything and everything, as his small hand grew cold in hers. "Sit," Margaret commanded, pushing Emma into the chair beside the bed. "You're no good to him if you collapse." As Margaret worked bathing Noah's fevered skin with cool cloths and dripping water between his cracked lips, Emma told their story in fragments: the wagon accident, their parents' death, the endless walk through the desert, Vincent Blackwood, their uncle, who'd threatened their father just weeks before the accident. He said Papa owed him money. Emma explained, her voice growing stronger with rest and sips of water. But Papa said he didn't said Uncle Vincent was trying to steal our land. They fought terrible, and Uncle Vincent said Papa would regret crossing him. Margaret and Samuel exchanged glances over Noah's still form. Land disputes in the territory could turn deadly fast. Men had been killed for less than a creek's water rights or a fertile valley. Your uncle, Samuel said carefully. He know you survived. Emma shook her head. I don't think so. We were thrown clear when the wagon went over, landed in a ravine. By the time I climbed back up, she trailed off, and Margaret saw her reliving it, saw the moment childhood ended in those young eyes. Noah stirred, a soft moan escaping his lips. His eyes fluttered open, unfocused and confused. Mama, he whispered. Emma was beside him, instantly taking his small hand in both of hers. It's me, Noah. It's Emma. You're safe now. Where's Mama? The question hung in the air like smoke from a snuffed candle. Emma's face crumpled, but before she could answer, Margaret spoke. Your Mama asked these good people to take care of you, she said, her voice gentle in a way Samuel hadn't heard in months. You're sick right now, but you're going to get better. I promise. There it was. A promise. The first one Margaret had made since Benjamin. Samuel felt something shift in the room, subtle but profound, like the first green shoot pushing through scorched earth. Noah's eyes found Margaret's face, studying her with that unnerving intensity children sometimes possessed. You look sad, he said simply. Margaret's hand stilled on the cloth she was wringing out. Sometimes people are sad, she said carefully. My mama was sad sometimes too, Noah said. But Emma would sing to her, and then she'd smile again. Emma knows all the best songs. Is that so? Margaret looked at Emma, who blushed despite everything. Mama taught me, Emma said quietly. She said songs could heal hearts when nothing else could. The room fell silent, except for the sound of water dripping into a basin and the distant call of a hawk outside. Samuel watched his wife's face, saw the battle being waged there between self-preservation and compassion. He knew better than to push. Margaret would find her own way, or she wouldn't. But these children, especially this little boy who looked so much like Benjamin, it made his chest ache. They might be the key to unlocking the prison she'd built around her heart. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the room in shades of gold and amber, Noah's fever finally broke. His breathing deepened, becoming the natural rhythm of healing sleep. Emma finally allowed exhaustion to claim her, curled in the chair, with her hand still holding her brother's. Margaret stood watching them for a long moment. They can't stay, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. No. Samuel agreed, though he made no move to actually do anything about it. We can't replace. Margaret couldn't finish the sentence. Nobody's asking us to, Samuel said gently. But maybe we could just keep them alive. That's all. Just keep them alive until we figure out what comes next. Margaret nodded, wrapping her arms around herself as if cold despite the evening warmth. Just until they're well. Then they go to proper families, people who aren't broken. But even as she said it, Samuel saw her eyes drift back to Noah's sleeping face, saw her unconsciously straighten the quilt around his small shoulders. He recognized the beginning of something he'd thought they'd never feel again. Not quite hope, not yet, but maybe the shadow of it. Outside the desert began its nightly transformation, dangerous heat giving way to dangerous cold. But inside the Carter house, for the first time in 6 months, warmth that had nothing to do with the fireplace began to kindle. It was fragile, this new thing being born from tragedy and chance. It could shatter at any moment, Samuel knew, but for tonight it was enough that 2 lost children slept safe under their roof. tomorrow would bring its own challenges, its own decisions. For tonight, broken people had found each other in the vastness of an unforgiving land, and that simple fact felt like a miracle worth protecting. The nightmares came for Emma first, 3 nights after Samuel had carried them from the desert. She woke screaming, her hands clawing at invisible sand, her voice raw with terror. "The wheel, Papa, the wheel's breaking." Margaret was there before the echo died, moving through the darkness with the instinct of a mother, even though she'd tried to bury that part of herself. She found Emma tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, eyes wild and unseeing, still trapped in that moment when everything ended. "Shh, child. You're safe. It's just a dream." Margaret's hands were steady as she smoothed Emma's damp hair, though her heart hammered against her ribs. This was too familiar, too much like those nights with Benjamin when the fevered dreams took him. "I couldn't hold on." Emma sobbed, her body shaking. "Mama told me to hold on, but my hands, they just let go. I let go, and then the wagon." "Tell me," Margaret said quietly. Sometimes the only way through the darkness was to walk straight into it. "Tell me what happened." Emma's story came in fragments like pieces of shattered mirror, each one reflecting a different angle of horror. The morning had started beautiful, she said. Papa whistling as he drove the wagon, Mama humming, while she mended Noah's torn shirt. They were heading to their new claim, the land Papa had worked 3 years to buy, saved every penny for. "Papa said it had the best soil in the territory," Emma whispered. "Said we'd grow corn tall as houses and have a garden like Mama always wanted, with roses." She loved roses. The wagon wheel had been making noise for hours, a grinding complaint that Papa kept saying he'd check when they stopped for noon rest. But they never made it to noon. Emma remembered the sound first a crack, like lightning splitting wood. Then the world tilted, everything sliding sideways in a horrible slow motion that seemed to last forever and end too quickly. "Noah was sleeping in my lap," Emma continued, her voice hollow. "When the wagon started to tip, I wrapped my arms around him and we fell out the back. But Mama and Papa..." She stopped, unable to continue. Margaret held her tighter, feeling the child's grief like a physical thing, heavy and suffocating. She knew this weight, had carried it for 6 months, would carry it forever. "You saved your brother," Margaret said firmly. "You did what your mama wanted most. You saved him. But I couldn't save them." The words were muffled against Margaret's shoulder. "I tried to dig them out, but the wagon was so heavy, and Papa wasn't moving, and Mama just kept getting quieter and quieter, until..." Margaret closed her eyes, seeing it too clearly. The child trying to lift a wagon off her dying parents, small hands bloody from the effort, the desert sun beating down on a scene no child should witness. In the other bed, Noah stirred, but didn't wake. He'd been having his own nightmares, calling out for parents who would never answer. But his were different from Emma's, where she remembered everything in brutal clarity. Noah's memories were fragmented, merciful in their incompleteness. He remembered the wagon ride, remembered Emma singing to him, remembered being thirsty. The rest was blank, a mercy Margaret envied. "Would you like to tell me about them?" Margaret asked. "Your parents, not how they died, but how they lived." Emma pulled back slightly, studying Margaret's face in the moonlight streaming through the window. "Would you tell me about Benjamin?" The name hit Margaret like a physical blow. Nobody had spoken it aloud in this house since the funeral. Samuel had tried once, and she'd fled to the barn, staying there until darkness drove her back inside. But something about this child's grief, so fresh and raw, made her own seem almost bearable by comparison. "He was 7, Margaret heard herself say. 7 years old and convinced he could train a crow to deliver messages. Spent weeks leaving corn out talking to this one particular bird he'd named Midnight. Did it work? Emma asked, and Margaret found herself almost smiling. Lord, no. That crow ate our corn and mocked him from the fence posts. But Benjamin never gave up. said midnight was just taking his time learning to trust. Margaret's voice caught. He was like that with everything. Patient, believing. Emma nodded solemnly. Papa was like that too. He believed we could make it to California originally before we stopped here. Said all we needed was faith and hard work. What changed his mind? Mama got sick on the trail. Desert fever, the doctor in Tucson said. Papa spent everything we had on medicine and doctor bills. That's when he decided to claim land here, instead start over. Uncle Vincent said he was a fool, said the land wasn't worth nothing. Margaret noticed how the child's grammar slipped when she was emotional, reverting to patterns that suggested education interrupted by necessity. This uncle of yours, Vincent, tell me about him. Emma's whole demeanor changed, shoulders hunching as if expecting a blow. He's Papa's older brother. Mama said he was born mean and just got meaner. He gambles terrible, always owing money to dangerous men. Papa tried to help him, once gave him $500 to pay his debts. Uncle Vincent lost it all the same night, then came back saying Papa owed him more. When was this? 2 months ago, right before we left Tucson. Emma's voice dropped to a whisper. He came to our room at the boarding house. Papa made us hide under the bed, but we could hear everything. Uncle Vincent said Papa had cheated him out of his inheritance, that the land should have been his. Said he'd make Papa sorry. Margaret felt a chill that had nothing to do with the night air. Did your Papa go to the law? Emma shook her head. He said family business stayed in the family, but he started carrying his rifle everywhere after that. And Mama made us practice hiding, made it like a game for Noah. She'd say, quick as rabbits, and we'd find the nearest hiding spot. The practice had saved their lives, Margaret realized. When the wagon went over, the children's trained response to danger had thrown them clear. She wondered if their mother had known in those final moments that her preparation had worked. Samuel appeared in the doorway, drawn by the voices. He'd taken to sleeping light since the children arrived, one ear always listening. Everything all right. Bad dreams, Margaret said simply, but her eyes conveyed more. Later, they would need to talk about Vincent Blackwood and what threat he might pose. I could make some warm milk, Samuel offered. Might help with sleeping. Noah's voice piped up from his bed, surprising them all. With honey, Mama always put honey in warm milk. With honey, Samuel confirmed, and Margaret watched her husband's face soften in ways she hadn't seen in months. Come on, little man, let's go raid the kitchen. Noah scrambled out of bed, still unsteady, but determined, and took Samuel's offered hand with the trust of a child who'd decided these people were safe. Emma followed, and Margaret found herself part of a strange procession down to the kitchen, all of them in night clothes, all of them carrying invisible wounds. As Samuel heated milk and stirred in honey, Margaret found herself really looking at the children for the first time, not as intrusions or reminders of loss, but as themselves. Emma, with her tangled brown hair and eyes too old for her face, standing protective near her brother, even now. Noah, with his father's stubborn chin and his mother's gentle nature, humming something tuneless while he watched Samuel work. Your mama teach you that song? Margaret asked. Noah nodded enthusiastically. She knew hundreds of songs. Emma knows them all, too. She can sing just like Mama. I can't, Emma protested quietly. Not like her. You can, too, Noah insisted with the fierce loyalty of little brothers everywhere. You sang me all the way through the desert, every song Mama knew. Margaret saw Emma's face crumble slightly, the weight of having been strong for so long finally showing. Without thinking, she pulled the girl against her side, feeling the sharp bones of a child who'd given her food to her brother, who'd carried more than any child should. Singing through the desert, Margaret said softly. That's about the bravest thing I ever heard. Samuel poured the warm milk into 4 cups, and they sat around the kitchen table like a real family might, if you didn't look too close at the spaces between them, the careful distances they maintained, even while sharing comfort. Benjamin couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, Samuel said, suddenly surprising everyone, including himself. Boy would sing so off-key the roosters would crow just to drown him out. Samuel, Margaret breathed, half warning, half wonder. But Lord, he loved trying. Samuel continued, his eyes distant but warm. Every Sunday after church, he'd sing those hymns all the way home. "Shall We Gather at the River" was his favorite, though it sounded more like cats fighting when he did it. Noah giggled, the sound bright as morning in the dark kitchen. "I can't sing good either. Emma got all the singing, I got all the stubborn." "That's a useful trait," Samuel said seriously. "Stubborns kept many a man alive out here." They sat in comfortable silence after that, sipping warm milk and honey, each lost in their own thoughts. Margaret found herself memorizing the scene, the way the lamplight caught in Emma's hair, how Noah's feet didn't quite reach the floor, Samuel's hand resting on the table close to hers, but not quite touching. She thought about Benjamin's last days, how he'd asked her to sing to him when the fever got bad. She'd sung every song she knew, then made up new ones, anything to ease his passing. When his breathing finally stopped, she'd kept singing, unable to stop, as if the music might call him back. "I know a song about roses," Noah said suddenly. Mama's favorite. She said it was about love lasting forever, even when the roses died. "Will you sing it?" Margaret asked, though the request cost her something. Noah looked at Emma, who nodded encouragement. His voice was thin but sweet, the melody simple and haunting. Red roses in the garden, white roses by the door, pink roses at the window, but I won't see them anymore. Yet in my dreams they're blooming forever, fresh and new, and in my dreams I'm walking through rose gardens with you. Margaret didn't realize she was crying until Samuel's handkerchief appeared in her hand. She didn't realize she'd made a decision until she heard herself speak. "You'll stay," she said, the words coming from somewhere deeper than thought. "Both of you. As long as you need. This is your home. Now." Emma's eyes widened. "But you don't even know us. We could be trouble. We could." "You're children who need a home," Margaret interrupted gently. "We're people with a home that needs children. Sometimes the good Lord's plan is just that simple." She looked at Samuel, seeing her own recognition in his eyes. This wasn't replacing Benjamin. Nothing could. But maybe, just maybe, hearts could hold more than one love, more than one loss, more than one hope for tomorrow. "What about Uncle Vincent?" Emma asked, fear creeping back into her voice. "If he finds out we're alive, then he'll deal with us," Samuel said firmly. "And I've dealt with harder men than Vincent Blackwood, I promise you that." But even as he said it, Margaret saw the worry in his eyes. Men who killed for land were dangerous enough. Men who killed family for land were something else entirely. They would need to be ready, would need to protect these children who'd already lost everything once. As they climbed back upstairs, Noah slipping his hand into Margaret's like it belonged there. Emma walking close to Samuel's protective presence, Margaret felt something she'd thought was dead forever, not healing, not yet. The wound Benjamin left would never fully heal, but perhaps alongside it something new could grow, something that honored the past while reaching toward tomorrow. In Benjamin's room now, Noah's room, she tucked the covers around the small boy and found herself humming. It was the Rose song, the melody already carved into her memory. Noah smiled sleepily, and for just a moment, Margaret let herself imagine a future where this didn't hurt so much, where loving these children didn't feel like betrayal, but like benediction. The past would always be with them. Emma would always carry the weight of her parents' death, would always wonder if she could have held on tighter, done something more. Noah would grow up with gaps in his memory that love might fill, but never completely close. Margaret and Samuel would always have an empty space where Benjamin should be. But tonight, in this house that had known too much sorrow, 4 broken people had found each other. And sometimes Margaret thought, as she kissed Noah's forehead and smoothed Emma's hair, sometimes broken things fitted together better than whole ones ever could. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges. Vincent Blackwood was out there somewhere, a threat they'd need to face. The town would talk. The law might have opinions about informal custody arrangements. But tonight, they were safe. Tonight, they were together. Tonight, they were almost nearly possibly beginning to be a family. The moment Margaret truly saw the children, really saw them happen on a Tuesday morning, 2 weeks after their arrival. She'd been going through the motions of making breakfast, her hands performing familiar tasks, while her mind stayed carefully blank when she heard Noah singing in Benjamin's room. It wasn't the song itself that stopped her, it was the words he'd gotten wrong. The horses run through flowers, the cows jump over stars, the chickens dance at midnight, and the piggies drive the cars. Before she could stop herself, Margaret found herself standing in the doorway, watching Noah carefully dress himself, his small tongue poking out in concentration as he struggled with his buttons. He was singing Benjamin's favorite nonsense song, the one her boy had made up during his last good week before the fever took hold. But Noah had transformed it, made it his own without knowing its origin. "The piggies don't drive cars," she said softly. "They ride bicycles." Noah looked up, his face bright with delight. "That's even sillier. How do they reach the pedals?" "With very long legs," Margaret said. And then she was sitting on the bed beside him, helping with the stubborn middle button. "Or maybe they have special piggy bicycles made just the right size. With baskets for their corn," Noah added, bouncing slightly. "And little bells that go oink oink instead of ring ring." Margaret felt something crack inside her chest, not breaking, but opening like a door that had been rusted shut, finally giving way. This wasn't Benjamin. This small boy with his father's dark hair and his own crooked smile would never be Benjamin. But he was Noah, and Noah needed someone to help with his buttons and laugh at his silly songs. "Where's Emma?" she asked, realizing the older girl's absence. "Outside with Mr. Samuel. He's teaching her about horses. She says we need to know everything in case we have to run again." Noah's face fell slightly. "We won't have to run, will we, Mrs. Margaret?" The fear in his voice, carefully controlled but unmistakable, made Margaret's decision for her. She pulled him against her side, feeling his small body relax into her warmth. "No, sweetheart, you won't have to run. Mr. Samuel and I will make sure of that." Through the window, she could see Emma in the corral with Samuel, her thin body tense with determination as she learned to approach the gentlest of their mares. The girl's perpetual vigilance broke Margaret's heart. Even now, even safe Emma stood positioned to see all exits, ready to grab her brother and flee at the first sign of danger. Samuel was patient with her, his movements slow and deliberate, teaching her that not all large things meant harm, that sometimes strength could mean safety instead of threat. Margaret watched her husband's face, saw the careful way he was earning Emma's trust, inch by inch, gesture by gesture. "Can I tell you a secret?" Noah whispered, pulling Margaret from her observations. "Of course. Sometimes I forget what Mama looked like." His voice was tiny, ashamed. "I remember her dress was blue and she smelled like flower and sunshine, but her face gets all mixed up in my dreams." Margaret's throat tightened. "That's not forgetting her, Noah. That's just how memory works sometimes. The important things stay how she loved you, how safe she made you feel. The rest is just details." "Emma remembers everything," Noah said. "She draws Mama and Papa's faces in the dirt sometimes when she thinks I'm sleeping, so she won't forget. But then she always smooths them away before morning." That evening, Margaret found Emma doing exactly that, sitting in the fading light behind the barn, using a stick to trace features in the dust. The resemblance was crude, but somehow capturing something essential: a woman's kind eyes, a man's strong jaw. "You have an artist's eye," Margaret said, careful not to startle the girl. Emma quickly erased the drawings with her palm. "It's nothing, just remembering." "Would you like paper? We have some, and charcoal from the fireplace would work for drawing." Emma's hand stilled. "Why are you being so kind to us?" It was the question Margaret had been asking herself, the one that woke her at night. The easy answer was Christian charity, doing unto others, all the verses the preacher might quote. But the truth was more complex and painful. Because kindness is what we have left when everything else is gone, Margaret said finally. Because you and Noah remind me that life keeps going even when we think it's ended. Because... She paused, then spoke the hardest truth. Because taking care of you makes me feel like a mother again, and I'd forgotten how much I needed that. Emma's eyes, too old for her 9 years, studied Margaret's face. We're not trying to replace him, Benjamin. We know we can't. No, Margaret agreed, but you're not replacing him. You're adding to the story, not erasing what came before. That night, Samuel brought out the paper he used for keeping ranch accounts, several precious sheets, and showed Emma how to make charcoal sticks from burned wood. She drew her parents again, this time, permanent this time, to keep. Margaret and Samuel watched her work, seeing how she captured her mother's gentle smile, her father's proud posture. They loved you very much, Samuel said quietly. How do you know? Emma asked without looking up. Because you and Noah are here alive despite everything. Love like that doesn't just disappear. It stays with you, changes shape maybe, but stays. Noah had fallen asleep in Margaret's lap, his small hand clutching her apron even in dreams. The weight of him, the trust felt like absolution for sins she hadn't committed, guilt she shouldn't carry, but did anyway. Benjamin had died despite her love, despite her desperate prayers and sleepless nights. But Noah lived, and perhaps that was enough reason to try again. Tell us about the ranch, Emma said suddenly. How did you and Mr. Samuel meet? How did you come to be here? Margaret and Samuel exchanged glances, a whole conversation in a look. It had been so long since anyone had asked them to tell their story as something other than tragedy. I met Margaret at a church social in Austin. Samuel began, his voice warm with memory. She was serving lemonade, and I must have gone back for 7 glasses just to keep talking to her. 8. Margaret corrected, a small smile playing at her lips. And you didn't even like lemonade. Still don't, Samuel admitted, making Noah giggle sleepily. But I like the girl serving it something fierce. They told the story together, trading parts like a song they'd rehearsed. How Samuel had been working cattle drives, saving every penny for his own land. How Margaret had been teaching school, determined to stay independent, despite her father's attempts to marry her off to various merchant sons. He proposed during a thunderstorm, Margaret said. Showed up at the schoolhouse, soaking wet, said he couldn't wait another day to ask. She said yes before I even got the whole question out, Samuel added, then made me sit by the stove for an hour so I wouldn't catch cold. Emma's charcoal moved across the paper as they talked, capturing something Margaret hadn't seen in their own faces for months. The ghost of who they'd been before loss rewrote their story. We built this place board by board, Samuel continued. Margaret helped with everything, even when she was carrying. He stopped abruptly, the weight of Benjamin's absence suddenly heavy in the room. It's okay to talk about him, Emma said softly. We talk about Mama and Papa. It helps sometimes. Noah stirred, blinking awake. Are you sad again? Mrs. Margaret. Margaret realized there were tears on her cheeks. A little, but it's the kind of sad that's mixed with happy. Does that make sense? Noah nodded solemnly. Like when I remember Mama singing. It makes me sad she's gone, but happy I got to hear her. Exactly like that. Samuel cleared his throat. Benjamin would have liked you both. He always wanted siblings, someone to share adventures with. What kind of adventures? Noah asked, fully awake now and interested. Oh, he had grand plans, Margaret found herself saying. He was going to discover a new river and name it after his horse, build a bridge across it so everyone could visit, maybe find gold, but he'd share it with everyone in town so nobody would be poor. That's a good adventure, Noah said approvingly. Maybe we could find his river for him. The simple offer, the child's easy acceptance of carrying on another child's dream, undid something in both Margaret and Samuel. This wasn't about replacement or forgetting. It was about continuation, about love being bigger than loss. "There's something else," Emma said carefully, her drawing finished. "About Uncle Vincent. I didn't tell you everything." The adults tensed but waited. "He knew about the broken wheel," Emma said quietly. "I saw him near our wagon the night before we left. Papa had gone to settle accounts at the general store, and Mama was visiting with Mrs. Patterson. I was supposed to be sleeping, but I saw Uncle Vincent doing something to the wheel. I thought maybe he was fixing it, being nice for once." The implications hung heavy in the air. Not an accident. Murder. "You're sure?" Samuel asked, his voice carefully controlled. Emma nodded. "He had tools. And when he saw me watching, he said if I told anyone he'd hurt Noah. Said accidents happened all the time on the trail, especially to little boys who couldn't keep secrets." Margaret pulled both children closer, Mother Bear fierce. "He won't touch you, either of you." "We should go to the sheriff," Samuel said. "With what proof?" Emma asked, sounding far too adult. "It's just my word, and I'm a child. Uncle Vincent has friends men who owe him money or favors. Papa said the law only works when it wants to." She was right, and they all knew it. The territory's law was sketchy at best, favoring those with connections and cash. A child's accusation against an adult, especially about something that happened weeks ago and miles away, would carry little weight. "Then we make our own law," Samuel said firmly. "This ranch, this family, we protect our own." "Family?" Noah asked, his voice small and hopeful. Margaret and Samuel looked at the children, these small survivors who'd walked through hell and somehow kept their souls intact. They looked at each other, seeing past the grief to something new and precious taking root. "Family," Margaret confirmed. "If you'll have us. We're not your parents, and we won't try to be. But we'd like to be something. Whatever you need us to be." Emma's composure finally cracked. She'd been strong for so long, carried so much weight on her thin shoulders. The tears came silent at first, then in great gasping sobs that shook her whole body. Margaret gathered her close, and Samuel wrapped his arms around all of them, Noah included, creating a circle of safety in a dangerous world. "Does this mean we can stay forever?" Noah asked, his voice muffled against Samuel's shirt. "Forever, and then some," Samuel promised. Outside, the night deepened, bringing its own dangers and mysteries. Somewhere out there, Vincent Blackwood moved through the darkness, believing his brother's children dead, his path to their inheritance clear. But he'd made one crucial mistake. He'd taught Emma to be watchful, to remember everything, to survive at any cost. And now she had more than survival. She had Margaret's fierce protection and Samuel's steady strength. She had a home that was becoming more real with each passing day, and a brother who still sang silly songs despite everything they'd lost. The paper with her parents' portraits lay on the table, the charcoal lines bold and sure. Next to it, without anyone noticing, Noah had made his own drawing. 4 stick figures holding hands in front of a house, with a sun that had a smiley face and clouds that looked like sheep. "That's us," he announced proudly when he saw them looking. "Our new family. See, I made Emma tall because she's the oldest, and Mr. Samuel has a hat, and Mrs. Margaret has a pretty dress, and that's me with the biggest smile because I'm happy." It was crude and perfect, and everything they needed to see. Sometimes the most profound truths came from the smallest voices, the ones that hadn't learned yet that broken things couldn't be made whole again. "We should frame it," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. "Put it right in the kitchen where everyone can see." "Next to Benjamin's drawing of the elephant," Samuel added. "He'd like that, I think. Sharing his wall with new friends." Emma looked at her rough hands, still healing from the desert, still marked by loss. "Do you really think we can be a family after everything?" Margaret took those hands in her own feeling, the calluses too young to have formed the strength that shouldn't have been necessary. "I think we already are. We just needed to meet to remember it. That night, for the first time since they'd arrived, Emma and Noah slept without nightmares. In their own room, Margaret and Samuel lay awake, hands clasped between them, marveling at how empty spaces could suddenly feel full again. "They're not ours by birth," Margaret whispered into the darkness. "No," Samuel agreed. "They're ours by choice. And maybe that's even stronger." Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Vincent Blackwood was still out there. The law would have questions eventually. The town would talk as towns always did. But tonight, in this house that had known too much sorrow, 4 souls had chosen each other, had chosen to call themselves family despite everything that said they shouldn't, couldn't, wouldn't work. The moon rose full and bright, casting silver light through the windows, illuminating Noah's drawing still on the kitchen table. 4 figures holding hands standing together, not perfect, not replacing what was lost, but real and present, and choosing to face tomorrow together. It was enough, more than enough. It was everything. The decision to make it official came 3 weeks later on an ordinary Thursday that would become extraordinary in memory. Margaret was teaching Emma to make bread, their hands covered in flour, when Sheriff Thompson rode up to the ranch with a telegram that changed everything. Samuel met him at the gate, immediately sensing trouble in the lawman's rigid posture. Sheriff Thompson was a fair man, had been a friend before Benjamin's death, had driven the Carters into isolation. But today, his face was grim. "Samuel," he said, dismounting heavily, "we need to talk about those children." In the kitchen, Margaret's hands stilled in the dough. Emma went rigid, her eyes darting to the stairs where Noah was napping. The girl's hand moved to the knife on the counter, not grabbing it, but noting its position. Old habits of survival died hard. "What about them?" Samuel asked, keeping his voice level. "Got a telegram from Tucson. Vincent Blackwood's been making inquiries about his brother's children. Says they might have survived the accident, wants the law to help locate them." Margaret appeared in the doorway, flour still dusting her apron. "And what did you tell Tucson?" Sheriff Thompson removed his hat, turning it in his hands. "Nothing yet. Wanted to talk to you folks first. Those children been here nearly a month now. Whole town knows it. Whole town's been keeping quiet about it. But if Blackwood makes this official files, proper papers—" "He murdered their parents," Emma said from behind Margaret, her voice steady despite her trembling hands. "He broke the wagon wheel. I saw him." The sheriff's eyebrows rose. "That's a serious accusation, young lady." "It's the truth." Emma stepped forward, chin raised. "Night before we left, he was messing with the wheel. Had tools. Saw me watching and threatened to hurt Noah if I told." Sheriff Thompson studied her for a long moment. "You'd swear to that in court?" "Yes, sir." "Still be your word against his. And he's got friends' influence. You're a child." Emma finished bitterly. "I know. That's why he thought he could get away with it." Margaret moved to stand beside Emma, her hand on the girl's shoulder. "What are you saying, Sheriff, that we should just hand these children over to their parents' murderer?" "I'm saying the law's got its limits," Thompson replied carefully. "But there might be another way. Judge Carter, no relation to you, Samuel. Despite the name, he's got some interesting ideas about custody and what's best for children. If you were to make things official before Blackwood does—" Samuel understood immediately. "Adoption. Legal guardianship, at least. File the papers claiming abandonment. Month in the desert, no family coming forward until now. Judge Carter's approved such things before, especially when the whole town stands behind it." "The whole town?" Margaret asked. Thompson's weathered face cracked into a small smile. "Ma'am, those children have been attending church, helping at the general store, bringing eggs to Mrs. Patterson. Emma helped Doc Morrison organize his medicine cabinet last week. Noah's been teaching the other young ones his silly songs at school. The town's decided they belong here. We just need to make it legal before Blackwood tries to claim otherwise." "How long do we have?" Samuel asked. I can delay my response to Tucson maybe a week. After that, it'll look suspicious. If you're going to do this, do it fast." After the sheriff left, the four of them sat around the kitchen table. Noah had woken from his nap, sensing the tension in the house. He climbed into Margaret's lap without hesitation, a gesture that still made her heart catch every time. "Are we in trouble?" he asked. "No, sweetheart," Margaret said, holding him close. "But we need to make some decisions." Samuel laid it out plainly. They could try to hide the children, but that would mean living in fear, always running. They could fight Blackwood's claim when it came, but the law might side with blood relation. Or they could act now, file for legal guardianship, make their case before Blackwood even knew the children were alive. "It would mean officially becoming our children," Margaret explained to Emma and Noah. "Not replacing your parents, never that. But legally, we'd be responsible for you. You'd be Carter's if you wanted." Emma's eyes filled with tears she wouldn't let fall. "You'd do that, even knowing Uncle Vincent will come, even knowing the trouble it could bring." "Especially knowing that," Samuel said firmly. "Family doesn't run from trouble, it faces it together." Noah looked between them all, his 5-year-old mind working through the implications. "Would you be our real mama and papa then?" Margaret's voice was gentle. "We'd be your legal mama and papa. Your real mama and papa will always be the ones who gave you life, who loved you first. We'd be the ones who love you now, who'll raise you and protect you and watch you grow." "Can we have both?" Noah asked. "Can we remember mama and papa but love you too?" "Oh, sweetheart," Margaret whispered, tears flowing freely now. "That's exactly what we hope for." Emma had been silent, staring at her hands. Finally, she looked up. "There's something else I need to tell you. About the land." They waited. "Papa hid the deed," she said quietly. "Before we left Tucson, he knew Uncle Vincent was after it, so he hid it. Told me where in case something happened." Samuel leaned forward. "Where?" "Sewn into the lining of Mama's Bible. The one I—" She stopped, pain crossing her face. "The one I couldn't save from the wagon." "So it's lost," Margaret said. "Maybe not." Emma's voice grew stronger. "Papa filed a copy with a lawyer in Tucson. Mr. Harrison, I think his name was. Papa said if anything happened, I should find him, tell him." She closed her eyes, remembering exactly. Tell him the sparrow flies at dawn, and he'd know what to do. Samuel and Margaret exchanged glances. This changed things. If the children had legitimate claim to valuable land, it gave Vincent even more motive for murder, but it also gave them leverage. "We'll telegraph this lawyer," Samuel decided. "Today. But first, we need to know, do you want this? Do you want to be our children officially?" Emma looked at Noah, seeing his eager nod, then back at the adults who'd saved them in every way that mattered. "We already are, aren't we? In every way except paper." "Yes," Margaret said simply. "You are." "Then let's make the paper match the truth." The next morning, they rode to town as a family. Samuel had put on his best shirt. Margaret wore the dress she'd worn to Benjamin's funeral, but with a new blue ribbon at the collar. For hope, she said. Emma and Noah were scrubbed clean, wearing clothes Mrs. Patterson had altered to fit them perfectly. The courthouse was small, just 2 rooms, but Judge Carter had made his chambers as imposing as possible. He was an elderly man with sharp eyes that missed nothing, known for both his fairness and his intolerance for fools. "So," he said, reviewing the papers Samuel had filed, "you want to claim guardianship of these children." "We want to claim our children," Margaret corrected, her voice steady. "They've been with us for a month. We've fed them, clothed them, loved them. They've become part of our family. And their blood relations. Uncle who threatened them," Emma said clearly, "who killed our parents for our land." Judge Carter's eyebrows rose. "That's a serious accusation." "It's the truth." The judge studied her for a long moment. "Tell me everything." So Emma did. Every detail, every threat, every moment of fear and survival. Noah added his own memories, fragmented but poignant. Margaret and Samuel provided the rest of the children's condition when found their recovery, the way they'd woven themselves into the fabric of the ranch and the town. And this Uncle Vincent Blackwood, he's looking for them. Started inquiries in Tucson, Samuel confirmed, but hasn't filed official papers yet. Because he thought they were dead, the judge mused. Convenient for him if they were. He turned to the children. Do you want to stay with the Carters? Yes, Noah said immediately. They're our family now. Emma nodded, adding, they saved us. In more ways than one. Judge Carter made notes, his pen scratching across paper. I'll need character witnesses. We have them, Samuel said. The whole town if needed. And they did. Over the next hour, a parade of townspeople appeared, having somehow known they'd be needed. Mrs. Patterson testified about the children's character and the Carters' devoted care. Doc Morrison spoke of their physical and emotional recovery. The school teacher praised their intelligence and adaptation. Even crusty old Tobias Martin, who rarely had a kind word for anyone, stated gruffly that those young'uns belong with the Carters. Anyone can see that. Finally, Judge Carter set down his pen. Here's my decision. I'm granting temporary emergency guardianship effective immediately. In 30 days, we'll have a formal hearing. If this uncle appears, he can make his case then. But these children are under the protection of this court and the Carters until that time. And if he doesn't appear, Margaret asked, then we make it permanent. The children become legally yours. Outside the courthouse, Noah whooped with joy, drawing smiles from passers-by. Emma stood quieter, but the relief on her face was profound. They were safe, at least for now. We need to telegram that lawyer in Tucson, Samuel said, and prepare for Vincent when he comes. He will come, Emma said quietly. When he finds out we're alive, he'll come. Let him, Margaret said, her voice steel. He'll find more than he bargained for. That evening, they celebrated quietly at home. Margaret made a special dinner. Samuel told stories that made Noah giggle, and Emma drew a new picture, the four of them standing before the courthouse official papers in hand, a family in law as well as love. Can I ask something? Noah said as bedtime approached. Do we call you Mama and Papa now? Margaret and Samuel exchanged glances, leaving it to the children. What feels right to you? Samuel asked. Noah considered this seriously. Maybe Mama Margaret and Papa Samuel. So we have our first Mama and Papa, and are now Mama and Papa. That sounds perfect. Margaret said, her voice thick. Emma had been quiet, but now she spoke. I might not be ready for that yet. Is it okay if I still call you Mr. Samuel and Mrs. Margaret for now? You call us whatever feels comfortable, Samuel assured her. Titles don't make family. Love does. That night, as the house settled into sleep, Margaret found herself in Benjamin's room, Noah's room now. The little boy was asleep, but he'd arranged all of Benjamin's carved animals around his pillow, integrating old and new in the way only children could. Emma appeared beside her. He would have loved Noah, wouldn't he? Benjamin. Margaret nodded, unable to speak. Maybe he sent us to you, Emma said softly. Maybe that's why Mr. Samuel found us right when Noah was dying. Maybe Benjamin wanted you to have someone to love again. It was a child's theology, simple and profound. Margaret pulled Emma close, this brave girl who'd carried so much. Maybe he did, she whispered. Maybe he did. Tomorrow would bring challenges. The telegram to Tucson might bring help or trouble. Vincent would eventually learn the truth. The 30 days until the final hearing would pass too quickly or too slowly, depending on perspective. But tonight, they were legal family protected by law and love alike. Tonight, Noah slept surrounded by carved animals and safety. Tonight, Emma could set down her constant vigilance at least a little. Tonight, the Carters were 4 instead of 2, their broken hearts beating in something like harmony, their choice to be family validated by law, but created by something much stronger, the decision to love past loss, to hope past hurt, to build something new from the ashes of what was. The papers were signed. The choice was made. The family was real. And somewhere in the darkness, moving closer with each passing day, Vincent Blackwood continued his search, unaware that his intended victims had found something more powerful than any legal document they'd found people willing to fight for them, die for them, if necessary. They'd found home. The first real test came on a Tuesday morning, 3 days after the court hearing. Noah woke screaming not from nightmares but from pain, his small body burning with fever. Margaret found him tangled in sweat-soaked sheets, delirious, calling for his first mother. "Mama, the horses are on fire. Tell them to stop." Margaret's hands trembled as she felt his forehead. The fever was high, too high, and her mind immediately went to Benjamin, to another fever that had started just like this. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't breathe, paralyzed by the possibility of losing another child. "Margaret," Samuel appeared in the doorway, took one look at her face, and understood. "It's not the same. This isn't the same." "Get Doc Morrison," she managed. "Fast." Emma stood frozen in the hallway, her face white. Will he? "He'll be fine," Margaret said, forcing strength into her voice. "But I need your help. Can you fetch cool water and clean cloths?" The next hours blurred together. Doc Morrison arrived, examined Noah with gentle efficiency, and diagnosed what Margaret had feared: scarlet fever. Not always fatal, but dangerous, especially for a child already weakened by recent ordeal. "We caught it early," Doc Morrison said. "That's good, but the next 48 hours will be critical." Margaret didn't leave Noah's side. She bathed his fevered skin, dripped water between his cracked lips, sang every song she knew, and some she made up. Emma helped, silent and efficient, but Margaret saw the terror in her eyes. The girl had already watched parents die. The possibility of losing Noah was unbearable. Samuel divided his time between the ranch work that couldn't wait and the sick room, bringing soup where Margaret wouldn't eat coffee she let grow cold. On the second night, when Noah's fever spiked dangerously high, he found Margaret sobbing silently, her head on the bed beside Noah's still form. "I can't do this again," she whispered. "I can't watch another child die." "I can't, Samuel." "You won't have to," he said firmly, though his own fear was evident. "This boy's a fighter. Look how he survived the desert. He's not giving up now." "Benjamin was a fighter too," Margaret said brokenly. It didn't matter. Samuel knelt beside her, taking her hands. "Then we fight harder. We don't give God a chance to make the same mistake twice." Emma appeared in the doorway with fresh water. She'd been crying, Margaret could tell, but her voice was steady. "Mrs. Margaret, could you teach me the song you were singing? The one about the mockingbird, I think. I think Noah likes it when we both sing." So they sang together, the grieving mother and the frightened sister, their voices blending in the lamplight. They sang through the terrible hours when Noah's breathing grew shallow, when his small body shook with chills despite the fever. They sang until their throats were raw, until the words became prayers, until the dawn broke through the window. And then, miracle of miracles, the fever broke too. Noah opened his eyes clear and focused for the first time in 3 days. "Mama Margaret, my throat hurts." Margaret laughed and cried simultaneously, gathering him close. "I know, sweetheart, but you're going to be okay. You're going to be just fine." Emma collapsed with relief, and Samuel caught her holding her as she finally let herself fall apart. They'd faced the monster that had taken Benjamin, and this time they'd won. The recovery was slow but steady. Noah had to relearn strength, had to build back weight. The fever had burned away. But he did it with the determination of a child who decided living was worth the effort. Margaret stayed close, but not suffocating, having learned the difference between protecting and imprisoning. During those recovery days, the family truly began to form. Emma started calling Margaret Mama Margaret without thinking about it, the title slipping out when she asked for help with her arithmetic. Samuel became Papa Samuel the day he taught Noah to whistle the little boy's delight at producing a wavering note worth more than gold. They developed rhythms, routines that felt both new and timeless. Mornings began with Samuel and Emma feeding the animals, while Margaret and Noah prepared breakfast. Emma discovered she had a gift with the chickens, could calm the most aggressive rooster with a look. Noah appointed himself egg collector, treating each egg like treasure. "Look, Mama Margaret, the brown hen laid 2 today. She must be extra happy." Afternoons brought different work. Samuel taught Emma to ride properly, not just the desperate clinging of escape, but real horsemanship. She took to it naturally, her body finding balance and grace she didn't know she possessed. "You've got natural seat," Samuel told her proudly. "Could be a real horsewoman someday." "Like you?" Emma asked, and the hero worship in her voice made Samuel's eyes mist. "Better than me, I reckon. You've got gentler hands." Margaret taught both children their letters and numbers, continuing the education that had been interrupted by tragedy. Emma was quick-hungry for knowledge, devouring every book in the house. Noah struggled more, his young mind wandering to songs and stories, but Margaret was patient, finding ways to make learning feel like play. If 3 chickens lay 2 eggs each, how many eggs total? So were 6. Can we name the chickens I want to call the red one Sunset? The town embraced them fully. Mrs. Patterson started bringing extra fabric, claiming she'd ordered too much, though everyone knew she wanted the children to have new clothes. The general store owner, Mr. Carson, always found an extra peppermint stick for Noah, a new penny notebook for Emma, but it wasn't all smooth. There were hard adjustments that scraped like sand in gears. The first major conflict came when Emma discovered Margaret had washed and mended her mother's shawl, the one thing she'd managed to save from the desert. Emma flew into a rage that surprised everyone, including herself. "You had no right. It smelled like her. Now it's gone. It's all gone." She barricaded herself in the barn, refusing comfort. It was Samuel who finally got through, not with words, but with presence, sitting outside the barn door, whittling until Emma's sobs quieted. "She didn't mean harm," he said finally. "She saw something that needed fixing and fixed it. That's what mothers do." "She's not my mother," Emma said, but the protest was weak. "No," Samuel agreed, "but she's a mother who loves you. There's a difference between replacing and adding Emma. Your mama's love is still yours, always will be. Margaret's love doesn't take from that. It adds to it." Emma emerged, finally red-eyed and exhausted. Margaret apologized, genuinely stricken at causing pain. Together, they found a way to preserve the shawl's memories. Emma kept a small piece, unwashed, sealed in an envelope with her parents' drawings, while wearing the clean shawl that now carried new memories too. There were other challenges. Noah wet the bed one night and was so ashamed he tried to hide it, terrified they'd send him away. Emma got in a fight at school when another child said she wasn't really a Carter. Samuel lost his temper when Emma tried to run off alone to check the fence line, his fear coming out as anger that left her in tears. But they worked through each challenge, learning the delicate dance of becoming family. Margaret learned to knock before entering the children's rooms, respecting their need for privacy and control. Samuel learned to explain rather than command, understanding that Emma's independence was hard-won and necessary. The children learned that rules came from love, not control, that consequences weren't abandonment. The garden became their greatest joint project. Margaret had always maintained a kitchen garden, but this year they expanded it, everyone contributing ideas. Noah wanted flowers for prettiness. Emma wanted herbs she'd seen her mother grow. Samuel suggested corn and beans. Margaret added tomatoes and squash. They worked together in the evenings when the heat softened hands in dirt, planning and planting. Noah sang to the seeds, convinced it helped them grow. Emma engineered an irrigation system using buckets and channels, her practical mind finding solutions to water shortage. Samuel built trellises and frames his hands, creating structure for growth. Margaret orchestrated it all, teaching about seasons and soil patience and hope. "Why do we plant more than we need?" Noah asked one evening, surveying their ambitious garden. "To share," Margaret explained. "Mrs. Patterson's arthritis makes gardening hard. Doc Morrison barely remembers to eat, let alone grow food. We plant enough for community." Emma understood immediately. "Like the town is our bigger family." Exactly like that. The garden became metaphor for their new life. Different plants growing together, each with its own needs, but sharing soil and sun, creating something beautiful and sustaining from individual elements. One evening, about 2 weeks into Noah's recovery, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Noah was curled against Margaret's side, still weak, but improving daily. Emma sat between Margaret and Samuel, her guard lowered enough to lean slightly against Samuel's shoulder. "Tell us about when you were little." Noah requested his favorite evening petition. Samuel and Margaret took turns sharing stories of childhood adventures and mishaps. Samuel told about the time he'd tried to ride a bull at age 7, convinced it would be just like a horse, only bigger. Margaret recounted her first attempt at baking bread, which had turned out hard enough to use as a doorstop. Benjamin tried to eat it anyway. She said the mention of his name coming easier now. "Said it wasn't bad if you soaked it in milk for an hour first." "He sounds funny," Noah said. "I wish I could have met him." "He would have loved you both," Samuel said simply. "Would have taught you all his mischief." "Like what?" Emma asked. Margaret and Samuel exchanged glances, then Margaret smiled. He had figured out that if you put corn kernels in your pocket and stood very still, the chickens would try to eat right through the fabric. He called it chicken tickling and thought it was the funniest thing in the world. Noah giggled. "Can I try that tomorrow?" "May I?" Margaret corrected gently. Then, "Yes, you may." As darkness fell and they moved inside, Emma surprised them all by initiating something new. Could we say prayers together, like a real family, Mama and Papa, always?" "We always did before bed." So they gathered in the living room, joining hands in a circle that felt both foreign and right. Samuel led his deep voice, rumbling through familiar words, but then each added their own. Emma prayed for her parents' souls for strength for the garden to grow. Noah prayed for the chickens, for his fever to stay gone, for Emma to smile more. Margaret prayed for wisdom, for healing, for the children's safety. Samuel prayed for protection, for unity, for the family they were becoming. "Amen," they said together, and in that moment they truly were together, not perfect, not replacing what was lost, but building something new and precious from the pieces of their separate griefs. That night, Vincent Blackwood felt like a distant threat, something that couldn't touch the solid reality they were constructing day by day. They were wrong. About that would learn soon enough that evil didn't respect the boundaries of love. But for now, in these precious days of building home, they were safe in their bubble of becoming. The house filled with new sounds. Noah's laughter echoing from the barn where he played with the barn cats. Emma's voice reading aloud in the evening, sharing stories with her chosen family. Margaret humming as she cooked the melody, no longer mournful, but hopeful. Samuel's boots on the porch coming home, not to emptiness, but to belonging. They were learning each other's languages. Emma knew that Margaret's quick efficiency meant anxiety, that slowing her down with a question or request for help eased her worry. Noah understood that Samuel's silence wasn't anger, but thinking that waiting quietly beside him would eventually yield stories or solutions. Margaret recognized Emma's need to check exits to know escape routes and made sure the girl always knew where the house keys were. Samuel saw that Noah's silly songs were how he processed fear, that joining in, rather than shushing him, helped most. One morning, Emma found Margaret crying in Benjamin's room, Noah's room holding one of the carved animals. "I'm sorry," Margaret said, wiping her eyes quickly. "I didn't mean for you to see." "It's okay to miss him," Emma said, wise beyond her years. "We miss our parents every day, but missing them doesn't mean we love you less. Maybe love gets bigger, not smaller. Maybe we can love everyone, the dead and the living too." Margaret pulled her close. "When did you get so wise?" "When I had to," Emma said simply. That afternoon, they all went to Benjamin's grave together for the first time since the children arrived. It was a small cemetery on a hill overlooking the valley, peaceful and pretty. Noah picked wild flowers along the way, creating a bouquet with 7-year-old concentration. For Benjamin, he announced, placing them carefully on the grave. "So he knows we're taking care of his mama and papa." Emma added a small drawing she'd made Benjamin as she imagined him playing with the carved animals, smiling. "So he knows we're not trying to take his place, just making new places." Margaret and Samuel stood speechless, overwhelmed by the children's intuitive understanding of grief and grace. This was what building home meant, not erasing the past, but incorporating it, honoring what was while embracing what could be. As they walked back, Noah slipped his hand into Margaret's. Emma walked close to Samuel's side. They looked to anyone passing like what they were becoming, a family unconventional in its formation, but genuine in its connection. The telegram from the lawyer in Tucson arrived that evening, brief but significant. "Sparrow received. Documents secured. Will await your instruction. Danger likely. Proceed with caution. Harrison." Samuel folded the telegram carefully. "So the land deed is safe. That's good. But Uncle Vincent will come when he finds out we're alive," Emma said. "We have 2 more weeks until the permanent custody hearing," Margaret calculated. 2 weeks to solidify our claim, to make sure no judge would even consider giving you to him. 2 weeks to be ready, Samuel added grimly. But that night, they didn't dwell on the threat. Instead, they focused on the present. Noah showing off his new ability to whistle 2 whole notes, Emma helping Margaret with a complicated new recipe, Samuel teaching them all to play checkers, the evening ending with exhausted content collapse into beds that felt like home. They were building something stronger than they knew. Each shared meal, each solved conflict, each moment of chosen love was mortar between bricks, creating walls that would prove harder to breach than Vincent Blackwood could imagine. The home they were building wasn't just physical shelter, it was emotional fortress, spiritual sanctuary, a place where broken people had chosen to heal together. And that kind of home, built from choice, rather than chance, from love, rather than law, would prove impossible to destroy. Though Vincent Blackwood would certainly try, the Sunday that changed everything started like any other. The Carter family, for that's what everyone called them now, arrived at church in their wagon. Noah bouncing with excitement because he'd been chosen to help ring the bell that called everyone to worship. Emma wore the new dress Mrs. Patterson had sewn blue, like her mother's favorite color, but styled like Margaret's, a perfect blend of past and present. They'd been attending regularly for 6 weeks now, their place in the third pew as established as any tradition. But this Sunday was different. This Sunday, Vincent Blackwood sat in the back row, his presence like a snake in the garden. Emma saw him first. Her whole body went rigid, her hand crushing Samuel's in terror. "Papa Samuel." She whispered the title she'd only recently begun using, now urgent with fear. "He's here." Samuel didn't turn, didn't react except to squeeze her hand reassuringly. "I see him. It's all right. We're in God's house, surrounded by friends. He can't hurt you here." But Vincent's presence poisoned the entire service. Noah, who'd been so excited about bell ringing, shrank against Margaret when he spotted his uncle. The congregation noticed, of course. Nothing happened in Silver Creek without everyone knowing, and the stranger who made the Carter children cower was immediately marked as threat. Reverend Mills, a man who usually preached about loving thy neighbor, delivered a sermon about protecting the innocent that felt pointed as an arrow. His eyes found Vincent frequently, his words about wolves among sheep carrying extra weight. "The Lord calls us to shelter the orphan and widow." Reverend Mills intoned his usually gentle voice, carrying steel, "to stand against those who would harm the vulnerable." This is not just suggestion, brothers and sisters. This is commandment. After the service, Vincent made his move. He approached on the church steps where everyone could see his smile, sharp as broken glass. "Emma, Noah, I'm so relieved to see you're alive." His voice carried theatrical concern that fooled no one. "I've been searching everywhere. Your poor parents would want you with family." "We are with family," Emma said, her voice stronger than her trembling body suggested. "The Carters are our family now." Vincent's facade cracked slightly. "Blood is blood, girl. You belong with me." "Like our parents belonged in the ground," Emma shot back, and gasps rippled through the gathered crowd. Vincent's face darkened. That's a serious accusation from a confused child who's been through trauma. "It's the truth," Emma said clearly. "You broke the wagon wheel. I saw you." The crowd pressed closer, protective and curious in equal measure. Mrs. Patterson moved to stand beside Margaret, her usually pleasant face stern. Doc Morrison flanked Samuel. Even old Tobias Martin shuffled over his ancient rifle, conspicuously propped against his shoulder. "Seems to me," Sheriff Thompson said, appearing as if from nowhere, "that these children are exactly where they should be. Unless you got legal papers saying otherwise." Vincent's smile returned predatory. "I will have. Count on it. The law recognizes bloodkin over strangers playing house." "We're not playing," Margaret said quietly, but her voice carried. "We're living. We're loving. We're family in every way that matters." "Pretty words won't hold up in court," Vincent sneered. "I'll be back with proper documentation. Enjoy your borrowed time." He left then, but his threat lingered like smoke. The congregation immediately closed ranks around the Carters' voices, overlapping with support and outrage. "That man's got devil in him," Mrs. Patterson declared. "Anyone can see it." "We won't let him take those children," Doc Morrison stated firmly. "Not after everything they've been through." Reverend Mills approached Samuel quietly. "The church stands with you, whatever you need." It was Tobias Martin who surprised everyone. The old hermit, who barely spoke to anyone, spat tobacco juice and declared, "That snake comes near those young'uns again, he'll answer to me, and I don't miss what I aim at." That afternoon, an impromptu town meeting formed at the general store. Without being asked, people began organizing. Mrs. Patterson started a petition supporting the Carters' custody. The school teacher offered to document the children's progress and adjustment. Business owners pledged to testify about the family's character, but it was young Timothy Carson, the general store owner's son, who provided the most unexpected help. He was 17, gangly and shy, but he approached Emma with determined courage. "I heard something," he said quietly. "Last week in Tucson, my pa sent me for supplies, and I was at the saloon. Not drinking," he added quickly, seeing Margaret's raised eyebrow. "Just getting lunch." But Vincent Blackwood was there, drunk and bragging. "About what?" Samuel asked. Timothy's Adam's apple bobbed nervously. "About how he was going to be rich once he got his hands on his brother's brats." "Sorry," he apologized to Emma and Noah. His words, not mine. Said the land was worth 10 times what his brother paid, that some mining company wanted it for the water rights. "Would you testify to that?" Samuel asked. Timothy straightened. "Yes, sir. Those kids belong here. Everyone knows it." The next few days saw the town transform into something like a protective army. The blacksmith, Hans Muller, started spending his evenings at the Carter Ranch, his massive presence a clear deterrent. The banker's wife organized a rotation of women to ensure Margaret was never alone with the children. Even the saloon girls, usually kept at society's edges, sent word that they'd heard things about Vincent's debts, his violent temper, his reputation for destroying anything he couldn't possess. It was community in its purest form, but it came with complications. Emma struggled with so much attention, her desert-born independence chafing at constant protection. One evening, she exploded at Margaret. "I don't need everyone watching me. I kept Noah alive for 4 days in the desert. I can take care of myself." Margaret pulled her close, feeling the tension in the girl's thin body. "I know you can, but you don't have to anymore. That's what family means. You don't face things alone." "But what if they get tired of helping? What if Uncle Vincent offers them money or threatens them?" "Then we'll find out what this town is really made of," Samuel said from the doorway. "But I think we already know." He was proven right the next day when Vincent returned with 2 hired guns, rough men with dead eyes and hands that hovered near their pistols. They rode through town, slowly, deliberately trying to intimidate. Instead, they found the entire town armed and ready. Hans Miller stood outside, his smithy hammer in hand. Doc Morrison sat on his porch, his medical bag at his feet, but his old army rifle across his lap. Mrs. Patterson was watering flowers with one hand, her late husband's pistol visible in her apron pocket. Vincent and his men stopped at the sheriff's office where Thompson waited with 2 deputies. "Gentlemen," the sheriff said cordially, "something I can help you with." "We're here on legal business," Vincent said. "These men are witnesses to my brother's verbal promise that I'd care for his children if anything happened to him." "Funny how witnesses appear when money's involved," Thompson observed. "These men know your brother personal-like." One of the hired guns shifted uncomfortably. The other spat tobacco juice that landed suspiciously close to Thompson's boot. "They knew him well enough," Vincent said smoothly. "Well enough to know he had a birthmark shaped like a crescent moon on his left shoulder." Emma's voice rang out from the general store where she'd been listening. "Or that he couldn't whistle but could play the harmonica. Or that he was afraid of mice but not rattlesnakes." The hired guns exchanged glances. They'd clearly been coached on basic information, but not these intimate details. Vincent's face flushed. "Get back inside, girl. This is adult business." "No," Emma said, stepping fully into the street. Noah appeared beside her, then Margaret and Samuel, then what seemed like half the town forming a protective wall behind the children. "This is family business," Emma continued, "and my family is right here. My papa Samuel, who saved us from the desert. My mama Margaret, who healed us with love. These people who've shown us more kindness in 2 months than you showed my father in his whole life. Blood is," Vincent started. "Blood is what you spilled when you killed our parents." Emma's voice cracked with emotion. "I saw you with the wagon wheel. I heard you threaten Papa. I know what you did, and soon everyone will know." Vincent took a step toward her, but found his path blocked by Hans Miller, all 6'4" of blacksmith muscle. "I wouldn't," Hans said simply. The standoff lasted another moment before Vincent backed down. "This isn't over. The hearing is in 5 days. The law will give me what's mine." "The children aren't property," Margaret said fiercely. "They're not yours to claim." "We'll see about that," Vincent snarled, then turned to his hired guns. "Come on, we've got preparations to make." As they rode out, the town remained gathered, a human shield around the Carter family. Old Tobias Martin summed up everyone's feelings. "That man comes for these children. He comes through all of us." That evening, the Carters hosted an impromptu gathering. People brought food, creating a feast from shared offerings. Stories were told, plans were made, bonds were strengthened. Emma and Noah, initially overwhelmed, began to understand something profound. They weren't just loved by the Carters. They were loved by an entire community. Mrs. Patterson pulled Emma aside at one point. "Your mama would be so proud of how brave you are." "You knew her?" Emma asked, surprised. "Met her once at the Mercantile in Tucson. You were just a baby. She was buying fabric to make you a dress. Said she wanted you to have beautiful things, even if they couldn't afford much. She loved you, fierce child. That kind of love doesn't die." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "I miss her so much." "Of course you do. But look around, her love for you planted seeds that are blooming here. All these people caring for you, that's your mama's love multiplied. Meanwhile, Noah had discovered that Tobias Martin, the grouchy hermit, knew hundreds of silly songs, each more ridiculous than the last. The old man's weathered face transformed when he sang Years Falling Away, as he taught Noah verses about elephants wearing pants and giraffes afraid of ants. "Why don't you sing in town?" Noah asked innocently. Tobias's face clouded. "Lost my reasons for singing long time ago, boy." "But you're singing now," Noah pointed out with 5-year-old logic. Tobias looked at the child, then at the gathered community, his expression softening. "Guess I found a new reason." As the evening progressed, plans solidified for the custody hearing. The lawyer from Tucson, Mr. Harrison, had agreed to come bringing the original land documents and evidence of Vincent's debts to dangerous men. Character witnesses lined up each with specific examples of the Carters' excellent care and the children's flourishing. But Samuel knew Vincent wouldn't play fair. That night, after everyone left, he and several men from town set up a watch rotation. If Vincent tried anything before the hearing, they'd be ready. Margaret found him on the porch near midnight rifle across his lap, eyes scanning the darkness. "Can't sleep?" she asked, settling beside him. "Keeping watch. Hans'll relieve me in an hour." Margaret leaned against his shoulder. "We could run, take the children, and disappear." "Is that what you want?" Margaret considered. "No. This is our home. This is their home. We stand and fight. Even if we lose, we won't lose," Margaret said firmly. "Look what happened today. The whole town stood up. Vincent expected to intimidate everyone, and instead, he found a wall of love." "Love doesn't always win in court," Samuel said grimly. "No," Margaret agreed, "but it wins in life. And those children have already had too much taken from them. We don't teach them to run. We teach them to stand." Inside, Emma lay awake, listening to the murmur of voices, the creak of boots on the porch as the watch changed. She had heard Margaret's words about standing instead of running, and something inside her, something that had been coiled tight since the desert, finally relaxed. This was different from before. Before it had been just their family against the world, isolated and vulnerable. Now it was a community, a chosen tribe of protectors who decided these children mattered. Uncle Vincent might have money and legal arguments, but the Carters had something more powerful. They had people willing to fight for love instead of greed. Noah mumbled in his sleep something about elephants and dancing chickens. Tobias's songs mixing with his dreams. Emma smiled, remembering how terrified he'd been in church that morning, how he'd still managed to stand tall when facing Uncle Vincent. Her little brother was learning to be brave in safety, a luxury she'd never had before. A soft knock at the door made her tense, but it was just Margaret checking on them. "Can't sleep, sweetheart," Margaret asked, sitting on Emma's bed. "Thinking," Emma admitted, "about community. Mama used to say it takes a village to raise children. I didn't understand what that meant before. And now I see it. All those people today, they weren't just helping us. They were claiming us. We're not just your children anymore. We're Silver Creek's children." Margaret smoothed Emma's hair. "Does that feel good or scary?" "Both," Emma admitted, "but mostly good. Like we're worth protecting. Like we matter. You do matter. To me, to Samuel, to this entire town. Vincent can't take that away, no matter what happens at the hearing." Emma was quiet for a moment, then asked, "What if the judge believes him? What if blood really does matter more?" Margaret's voice was fierce. "Then we keep fighting. We appeal. We find another way." "But Emma, I need you to hear this. You and Noah are our children now. Papers or no papers, judge or no judge. We chose you, and we'll keep choosing you every day for the rest of our lives." Emma burst into tears, months of held tension finally releasing. Margaret held her through it, rocking her like the child she still was beneath all that forced strength. "I love you, Mama Margaret," Emma whispered when the tears finally stopped. "I love you too, my brave girl. So much." Outside, the watch continued. Hans Miller had replaced Samuel, his massive form, a reassuring shadow on the porch. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. The hearing loomed like a storm on the horizon, and Vincent Blackwood was certainly plotting something. But tonight, Silver Creek stood guard. Tonight, a community had become family. Tonight, 2 orphan children slept safely, knowing they were loved not just by 2 people, but by an entire town. The battle for their future was coming, but they wouldn't face it alone. They had something Vincent, with all his legal claims and hired guns, could never understand. They had people who'd chosen love over law, community over convention, and family over blood. And in the end, that would make all the difference. The night before the custody hearing, the storm came without warning. Not rain or wind, but something far worse, Vincent Blackwood and 6 hired men arriving under cover of darkness when the town least expected it. Emma woke to the sound of breaking glass downstairs, her desert-trained instincts firing before her mind fully engaged. She grabbed Noah, clamping her hand over his mouth before he could cry out, and pulled him to the hiding spot she'd identified weeks ago, a crawl space behind the wardrobe that led to the attic. Quick as rabbits, she whispered their mother's old code, and Noah understood immediately. They heard Samuel's voice, low and dangerous. "You're making a mistake, Blackwood. The only mistake was thinking you could steal what's mine." Vincent's voice slurred slightly. He'd been drinking, which made him more dangerous, not less. "Those brats are worth a fortune, and I'm collecting tonight." "Over my dead body," Samuel growled. "That can be arranged." The sound of struggle erupted furniture, crashing men shouting, Margaret screaming Samuel's name. Emma pressed Noah further into the crawl space, her mind racing. They needed help, but the nearest neighbor was a mile away by the time anyone arrived. "Find those children," Vincent roared. "Tear this place apart." Heavy boots thundered up the stairs. Emma heard doors slamming open, furniture being overturned. Their bedroom door burst open, and through a crack in the wardrobe she saw 2 men, rough and armed. "Kids ain't here," one growled. "Check everywhere. They're hiding somewhere." Emma's heart hammered so loud she was sure they'd hear it. Noah trembled against her, but stayed silent, brave in his terror. The men searched roughly, tossing beds, emptying drawers. One approached the wardrobe. That's when they heard the gunshot from downstairs. Margaret's scream was primal, anguished. "Samuel, no." Emma bit her lip hard enough to draw blood, keeping herself from crying out. Noah's tears soaked her nightgown, but he didn't make a sound. "Boss shot someone," one of the men said. "We better grab those kids quick before this gets worse." They searched more frantically, but missed the narrow space behind the wardrobe. Finally, Vincent's voice called them back downstairs. Emma waited, counting to 100 before daring to peek out. "Stay here," she whispered to Noah. "No matter what." "Emma, no. I have to help them. Stay hidden. Promise me." Noah nodded, tears streaming. Emma crept toward the stairs, her bare feet silent on the wood. What she saw below made her stomach lurch. Samuel was on the floor, blood pooling beneath his shoulder. Margaret knelt beside him, pressing a dish towel to the wound, her face white with terror. Vincent stood over them, gun still in hand, his hired men ransacking the house. "Where are they?" Vincent demanded. "Tell me where those brats are hiding, or the next bullet goes in his head." "Gone," Margaret said through gritted teeth. "We sent them to town this afternoon. They're with the sheriff." Vincent backhanded her, sending her sprawling. "Liar, their beds were slept in." Emma couldn't watch any more. She crept back upstairs, her mind working furiously. They needed help fast. Then she remembered Benjamin's room had a window that opened onto the porch roof. From there, she could reach the bell Samuel had installed, the one they rang for emergencies. She found Noah first. "I need you to be the bravest you've ever been," she whispered. "Can you do that?" He nodded solemnly. "We're going out Benjamin's window. You're going to ring the bell while I create a distraction." What kind of distraction? Emma's face was grim. The kind that might make Uncle Vincent chase me. But that's okay, because I'm faster than him. And help will come. They crept to Benjamin's room. Emma's heart breaking at the sounds of violence below. The window stuck at first years of paint, sealing it shut, but desperation gave her strength. It opened with a crack that seemed loud as thunder, but the chaos downstairs covered it. Emma helped Noah onto the roof, pointing to the bell. "Ring it hard and don't stop, no matter what you hear." "Emma, I love you, Noah. Be brave." She didn't wait for his response. Emma climbed back inside and made her way to the top of the stairs. Taking a deep breath, she stepped into view. "Uncle Vincent," she called out, her voice carrying all the authority she could muster. "I'm the one you want. I'm the one who saw you break the wagon wheel. Let them go, and I'll come with you." Every head turned toward her, Vincent's eyes lit with triumph and greed. "Emma, no," Margaret cried out. "There you are, little bird." Vincent smiled cruelly. "Come down here, slowly." Emma descended step by step, her eyes never leaving Vincent's. Behind him, she saw Samuel trying to sit up, Margaret holding him back. Blood had soaked through the makeshift bandage. "You shot him," Emma said, her voice steady despite her terror. "Just like you killed my parents." "Your parents died in an accident," Vincent said smoothly. "Tragic, but accidents happen." "Murder happens too," Emma replied, "especially when there's money involved." She'd reached the bottom of the stairs. Vincent lunged for her, but Emma was ready. She darted sideways, using her small size and desert-born agility to evade his grasp. She ran toward the kitchen, Vincent and two men pursuing. That's when the bell began to ring. Clear and loud in the night, Noah rang it with all his might. The sound carried across the valley a clarion call that every ranch within miles would recognize as desperate need. "It's the other brat," Vincent snarled. "Get him!" The men scattered, some heading outside, others upstairs. In the chaos, Emma doubled back to Margaret and Samuel. "How bad?" she asked, dropping beside them. "Shoulder," Samuel gasped. "Missed anything vital, but bleeding bad." Margaret was trying to stay calm, but her hands shook. "Emma, you shouldn't have—" "Family protects family," Emma said firmly. "That's what you taught me." The sound of horses approaching fast made Vincent curse. He grabbed Emma's arm, yanking her to her feet. "You're my insurance now, girl." But Emma had survived worse than Vincent Blackwood. She went limp, becoming dead weight, a trick she'd learned dragging Noah through the desert. When Vincent adjusted his grip, she bit his hand hard, tasting blood. He howled, releasing her, and Emma scrambled away just as the door burst open. Sheriff Thompson entered, first gun drawn, followed by Hans Miller and half a dozen armed townsmen. Through the window, Emma could see more riders arriving, lanterns bobbing like fireflies converging on the ranch. "Vincent Blackwood, you're under arrest," Thompson announced. Vincent grabbed for Emma again, but she was already moving, putting the kitchen table between them. "You can't arrest me. These are my brother's children. I have rights." "You have the right to remain silent," Thompson said grimly, "though I doubt you'll use it." Vincent's hired men, seeing the numbers against them, began dropping their weapons, all except one who made the mistake of drawing on Hans Miller. The blacksmith's ham-sized fist connected with the man's jaw, dropping him like a stone. "Anyone else feeling brave?" Hans asked mildly. Noah's voice carried from the roof. Emma, are you okay?" "She's safe, boy," Tobias Martin called up. The old hermit had apparently run the entire mile from his cabin, his ancient rifle in hand. "You did good. You can stop ringing now." But Noah kept ringing until Emma appeared in the doorway, waving up at him. Only then did he stop, his small arms probably aching from the effort. Doc Morrison pushed through the crowd, medical bag in hand, immediately kneeling beside Samuel. "Let me see. Good, clean through. Missed the artery. He'll live, but I need to work. Everyone back." As the doctor worked, Sheriff Thompson dealt with Vincent and his men. The hired guns, faced with attempted kidnapping and assault charges, quickly turned on their employer, admitting he'd paid them to help steal the children. He said they were his property. One mumbled, said their land was worth a fortune, that some mining company— "Shut up," Vincent snarled, but the damage was done. That sounds like conspiracy to commit fraud, Thompson observed. Add that to breaking and entering assault with a deadly weapon attempted kidnapping. You're looking at a long time in prison, Blackwood. Vincent's face contorted with rage. He looked at Emma with such hatred that several men stepped between them. This isn't over, he hissed. You think you've won? I've got lawyers' connections. I'll be out in a week, and when I am. When you are, Judge Carter said, entering the house with an authority that made everyone pause. You'll find that I've already reviewed the custody case. Given tonight's events, I'm prepared to make an immediate ruling. You can't, Vincent protested. The hearing isn't until tomorrow. The hearing was to determine the best interests of the children, Judge Carter said coldly. I think tonight has made those interests abundantly clear. Emma and Noah Williamson are hereby legally adopted by Samuel and Margaret Carter, with all the rights and protections that entails. Any further attempts to contact or harm these children will be met with the full force of the law. He turned to the sheriff. I'm also ordering an investigation into the death of their parents. Young Emma's testimony about the wagon wheel, combined with Mr. Blackwood's demonstrated capacity for violence, warrants a thorough examination. Vincent lunged toward Emma one last time, screaming obscenities, but Hans Miller caught him holding him like a struggling child. I think he needs to sleep this off in a cell, Hans said calmly. As Vincent was dragged away, still screaming threats, Margaret finally allowed herself to collapse the strength that had sustained her, giving way to exhausted tears. Emma and Noah, retrieved from the roof by Tobias, clung to her, while Doc Morrison worked on Samuel. Is Papa Samuel going to be okay? Noah asked in a small voice. Samuel himself answered, his voice weak but warm. Take more than one bullet to keep me from you kids. Doc's patched up worse. Haven't you, Doc? Much worse, Doc Morrison confirmed, though his face was serious. But you're lucky. Inch to the right, and we'd be having a different conversation. As the house filled with concerned neighbors, each offering help, Emma noticed something remarkable. This wasn't just a community response to crisis. This was family extended and chosen, surrounding them with protection and love. Mrs. Patterson took charge of the household, directing the cleanup with military efficiency. The schoolteacher promised to stay with the children while Margaret tended Samuel. Tobias Martin stationed himself on the porch with his rifle, declaring he'd sit there until hell froze over or Blackwood was behind bars, permanent-like, whichever came first. But it was what happened next that truly showed the town's heart. Reverend Mills arrived with a document pages of signatures. What's this? Margaret asked, taking the papers with blood-stained hands. A petition, the Reverend explained. Started it this evening before all this. Every adult in Silver Creek signed it, stating that the Carter children, that's what we're calling them now, belong here, that any attempt to remove them would be an act against the entire community. Margaret's tears flowed freely as she read, name after name, some barely literate X's marked with careful dignity, others flowing script, all united in purpose. We also took up a collection, Mrs. Carson added, producing a substantial purse. For legal fees, medical bills, whatever you need, this family has given to this town for years. Time we gave back. Samuel, despite Doc's protests, insisted on sitting up. We can't accept. You can and you will, Hans interrupted. That's what family does. As dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of rose and gold, the immediate crisis had passed. Vincent was in jail, his hired men with him. Samuel would recover. The children were legally permanently Carters, but Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Vincent's words echoed lawyers' connections. Men like him didn't give up easily, especially when money was involved. She found Judge Carter before he left, pulling him aside privately. Sir, about the land, our parents' land. The deed is with a lawyer in Tucson, Mr. Harrison. The code is the sparrow flies at dawn. Papa Samuel knows. Judge Carter's eyes sharpened. You think this is about more than custody? I know it is. Uncle Vincent mentioned a mining company, water rights. The land's worth more than anyone knew. I'll look into it personally, the judge promised. In the meantime, that land is held in trust for you and Noah until you're of age. No one can touch it without my approval. Relief flooded through Emma. Thank you. Judge Carter studied her, this child who'd shown more courage than most adults. You saved your family tonight. That bell, the distraction brave and clever. I had good teachers, Emma said, looking at Margaret and Samuel. They showed me that family fights for each other. As the judge departed and the town slowly dispersed, promising to return, if needed, the Carter family finally had a moment alone. Samuel, bandaged and pale but stable, gathered them all close. We need to talk about what happens next, he said seriously. Vincent won't give up. Prison or not, he'll keep trying. Then we'll keep fighting, Margaret said firmly. All of us. I'm sorry, Emma said suddenly. This is all my fault. If we hadn't come here, don't you dare. Samuel interrupted, his voice fierce despite his weakness. You and Noah are the best thing that's happened to us. We almost died inside after Benjamin. You brought us back to life. But now you might actually die, Emma protested. Uncle Vincent shot you because of us. No, Margaret said firmly. He shot Samuel because Vincent is evil. That's on him, not you. And Samuel will heal. We all will, together. Noah, who'd been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. Is it over now? Is Uncle Vincent gone forever? The adults exchanged glances, unwilling to lie, but not wanting to scare him further. Emma answered with the truth, gentle but honest. He's gone for now. And if he ever comes back, we'll be ready. All of us. The whole town. That's right, Samuel agreed. We're not alone in this. We never will be again. As the morning progressed, the ranch slowly returned to some semblance of normal. The animals needed feeding. The cows needed milking. Life needed to continue despite the night's trauma. Emma and Noah helped with chores, finding comfort in routine. But Emma noticed the changes. Hans Miller and 3 other men were discreetly patrolling the property. Mrs. Patterson had organized a schedule of women to help Margaret while Samuel recovered. The town had formed a protective circle that Vincent would have to break through if he ever tried again. That afternoon, Mr. Harrison, the lawyer from Tucson, arrived with significant news. He'd investigated Vincent's claims and discovered something shocking. Vincent had massive debts to dangerous men who wouldn't hesitate to kill for payment. The mining company interested in the water rights had already paid Vincent a substantial advance money he'd already gambled away. He's desperate, Harrison explained. More desperate than you knew. Those men he owes won't care that he's in prison. If he doesn't deliver the land, they'll kill him, Samuel finished. Most likely. It was Margaret who voiced what they were all thinking. Then he'll do anything to get out to get that land. The good news, Harrison continued, is that I've secured the deed. It's now held in trust by Judge Carter, ironclad legal protection. Vincent can't touch it, neither can his creditors. What about us? Emma asked. Can they touch us? Harrison's silence was answer enough. That night, as Samuel rested and Margaret kept watch, Emma and Noah sat together on the porch, looking at the stars. The same stars that had witnessed their desperate flight through the desert now watched over their home. Were you scared? Noah asked. When Uncle Vincent came. Terrified, Emma admitted. But I was more scared of losing you, losing Mama Margaret and Papa Samuel. That fear was bigger than my fear of him. I was brave, wasn't I, ringing the bell? The bravest, Emma assured him. You saved us all. They sat in comfortable silence until Noah asked, Do you think our first parents can see us? Do you think they know we're safe? Emma pulled him close. I think they know. And I think they're glad we found Margaret and Samuel. They wanted us to be loved and safe. We are. Inside, Margaret listened to their conversation through the open window, her heart full despite the night's terror. They'd survived Vincent's worst assault. They'd stood together and won. But she knew, as Samuel knew, as even young Emma knew, this was just the first battle in what might be a long war. Vincent had shown he was willing to kill for that land. Prison walls might not hold him long, and his creditors wouldn't wait forever. Still looking at her children, for that's what they were now, completely and legally, Margaret felt ready for whatever came next. They'd built something stronger than Vincent's greed, deeper than blood, more powerful than law. They'd built a family that could weather any storm. And the storms were definitely coming. The letter came 6 weeks later, on a morning when the ranch had finally found its rhythm again. Samuel's shoulder had healed enough for light work, though Margaret still watched him like a hawk. Emma was helping Noah with his letters at the kitchen table when Sheriff Thompson rode up, his face grim. "Vincent's dead," he said without preamble, handing Samuel a telegram. "Killed in prison 3 days ago." Seems his creditors got impatient. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. Emma went very still, her arm tightening around Noah. Samuel read the telegram twice before speaking. "How?" "Another prisoner. Man named Coleman doing life for murder. Apparently, Vincent owed his boss $50,000. When it became clear Vincent couldn't pay from prison." Thompson shrugged. Coleman made sure he never would. "Good riddance," Margaret said fiercely, then caught herself looking at the children. "I shouldn't say that." "It's okay, Mama Margaret," Emma said quietly. "He was evil. The world's safer without him." But her voice carried something complex, not quite sadness, but a recognition that Vincent had still been family, however twisted. The last blood connection to their parents gone. Noah processed it differently. "Does this mean we're really safe now, forever?" "Yes," Samuel said firmly. "Forever." But the aftermath of Vincent's death brought unexpected complications. The mining company, having paid Vincent in advance, tried to claim rights to the children's land. Mr. Harrison earned his fee 10 times over, fighting them in court with Judge Carter's backing. The case made territorial news. Orphaned children standing against corporate greed. A David and Goliath story that captured public sympathy. During the legal battle, something beautiful happened. The town of Silver Creek didn't just support the Carters, they transformed around them. Inspired by the family story, neighbors began taking in other orphan children from the territory. Mrs. Patterson adopted a young girl whose parents had died of fever. Doc Morrison became guardian to twin boys he delivered whose mother died in childbirth. "You started something," Reverend Mills told Margaret one Sunday. "Showed us that family isn't just about blood, it's about choice." The mining company, faced with overwhelming public opposition and ironclad legal protection of the children's inheritance, finally withdrew their claim. The land would remain in trust until Emma turned 18, but the water rights were leased to local ranchers at fair prices, creating a modest income that went toward the children's education and future. Spring arrived with unusual glory that year, as if nature itself was celebrating their survival. The garden they'd planted together exploded with live tomatoes, heavy on the vine corn reaching toward the sky, Noah's flowers creating a riot of color that drew butterflies and hummingbirds. Emma had grown 3 inches her body, finally getting the nutrition it had been denied for so long. She rode horses with natural grace, helped Samuel with ranch work, and had begun teaching younger children at school, showing a gift for patience and explanation. Noah had transformed from a traumatized 5-year-old into a confident, joy-filled 6-year-old who sang constantly and had befriended every animal on the ranch. His latest project was training a crow not to deliver messages like Benjamin had tried, but to dance. Amazingly, it seemed to be working. "Look, Papa Samuel," he called one afternoon. "Midnight's doing the spinning trick." Samuel, his shoulder fully healed, now watched the crow hop in circles for corn kernels and laughed a full, rich sound that had been absent too long. "Benjamin would have loved this," he said, and for the first time mentioning his son brought more joy than pain. Margaret had perhaps changed the most. The brittle frozen woman who'd first seen the children had thawed into someone warm and vital. She laughed easily, now saying while she worked, and had begun teaching Emma the complex art of quilt making, passing down skills from mother to daughter. One evening, as they worked on a quilt together, a pattern called Wedding Ring that would be Emma's hope chest piece, Emma asked, "Do you ever regret it? Taking us in when you were already hurting so much?" Margaret's hand stilled on the fabric. "The only thing I regret is that Benjamin never got to meet you. He would have loved having siblings." "Maybe he knows anyway," Emma said softly. "Maybe he's happy we're here." "I like to think so." Margaret agreed, then added something she'd never said aloud. "You didn't replace him, Emma. You and Noah. You grew new chambers in my heart. Love doesn't divide, it multiplies." That multiplication was about to become literal. Margaret had suspected for weeks, but hadn't wanted to say anything until she was certain. That night, she told Samuel, first watching his face transform from confusion to wonder to pure joy. "A baby," he breathed. "We're having a baby." Margaret nodded, tears streaming. "I didn't think it was possible after all this time, but Doc Morrison confirmed it today." Samuel pulled her close, his own eyes wet. "When?" "Late fall. November, Doc thinks." They told the children the next morning at breakfast. Noah's reaction was immediate and enthusiastic. He started planning all the things he'd teach his new sibling, from crow dancing to the proper way to gather eggs without getting pecked. Emma's response was more measured. She hugged Margaret tightly, whispered congratulations, but Margaret saw the fear flickering in her eyes. Later, she found Emma in the barn brushing the horses with unnecessary vigor. "Talk to me," Margaret said gently. "What if you don't need us anymore?" Emma asked, not meeting her eyes. "When you have a real baby, your own baby." Margaret took the brush from Emma's hands, turning her to face her. "Emma Carter, you listen to me. You are real. You are mine. This baby will be blessed to have you as a big sister, just like Noah was blessed to have you. Nothing will change how much we love you. But it's different. This baby will be yours by blood. And you're mine by choice," Margaret said firmly. "Do you know what that means? It means we looked at all the children in the world and chose you. We fought for you. We bled for you literally in Samuel's case. That's not less than blood, Emma. That's more." Emma crumbled, then months of carefully controlled emotion breaking free. Margaret held her as she sobbed, understanding that this brave girl who'd carried so much was still just 12 years old, still needed reassurance that love wasn't finite. "Besides," Margaret said, when Emma's tears slowed, "this baby is going to need you. You're the one who knows about being a protective big sister. Noah had you. This little one will need you too." "Really? Really?" "I'm counting on you to teach them everything, how to be brave, how to be kind, how to sing through the darkness like you did." The summer passed in preparation and growth. The ranch prospered, Samuel having recovered fully and thrown himself into improvements. They built a new room for the baby, but also expanded Emma and Noah's spaces, making clear this was their permanent home. The town rallied around them once again, but differently this time, with joy rather than crisis. Mrs. Patterson organized a quilting bee where women created blankets for the new baby. Hans Miller forged a beautiful cradle as a gift. Even Tobias Martin, the old hermit, carved a set of wooden toys with surprising skill. Emma and Noah threw themselves into their roles as soon-to-be older siblings. Noah practiced being gentle with increasingly patient barn cats. Emma read every book about babies she could find, becoming an expert on theoretical infant care. One significant event marked that summer, the official reading of their parents' will, finally retrieved from the destroyed wagon. Mr. Harrison had managed to restore the water-damaged document, revealing something unexpected. Their parents had written letters to be given to the children on specific birthdays. The first set was to be opened when Emma turned 13, which would be in just a month. On her birthday, surrounded by her chosen family and half the town, Emma opened the letter with trembling hands. Her mother's careful script blurred through tears as she read aloud, "My dearest Emma, if you're reading this, it means we're gone, but you've survived. You've reached 13, that magical age between childhood and womanhood. I pray you found good people to love you, to guide you through these years we can't share. Remember that our love doesn't die with our bodies. It lives in you, in your kindness, your strength, your fierce protection of those smaller than yourself. Whatever family you found or created, honor them. Blood makes relatives, but love makes family. All our love, Mama and Papa." There wasn't a dry eye in the room. Samuel cleared his throat roughly. "They'd have been proud of who you've become." "They are proud," Noah corrected with 6-year-old certainty. "They watch us from heaven. The Reverend said so." As autumn arrived and Margaret grew round with new life, the ranch settled into a rhythm of contentment. The crisis with Vincent felt like something from another lifetime, a nightmare that had tested but not broken them. Emma had begun courting, or rather being courted by Timothy Carson, the general store owner's son, who'd testified about Vincent's drunken confessions. At 17 to her 13, it was understood any formal relationship would wait years. But Timothy brought her books, walked her home from church, and blushed crimson whenever she smiled at him. Samuel initially bristled at any boy showing interest in his daughter, but Margaret reminded him that Emma deserved normal teenage experiences after everything she'd endured. "Besides," Margaret added with a sly smile, "you were only 4 years older than me when we married." "That was different," Samuel protested. "How?" "It just was." He grumbled, but he stopped glowering at Timothy quite so much. Noah, meanwhile, had become the town's unofficial spreader of joy. His silly songs, taught by Tobias Martin and enhanced with his own creative verses, were requested at every social gathering. He'd started a trend of Noah's Nonsense Nights at the church, where children performed ridiculous skits and songs to raise money for charity. "He's healing the whole town," Reverend Mills observed to Margaret. "That boy takes pain and transforms it into laughter. It's a rare gift." The baby came early on a crystalline November morning when the first snow dusted the mountains. The labor was long but uncomplicated, with Doc Morrison attending and Emma assisting with remarkable calm. Noah waited on the porch with Samuel, both pacing identical worried paths until a tiny cry split the air. "It's a girl," Emma announced, appearing at the door with a grin that could have powered the sun. "A perfect, beautiful girl." Samuel rushed inside to find Margaret exhausted but radiant, holding a bundle of blankets from which peeked a red, wrinkled face topped with surprising amount of dark hair. "Meet your daughter," Margaret whispered. "Sarah Elizabeth Carter." "Sarah," Samuel breathed, touching the baby's impossibly small hand. "Hello, little one." Emma and Noah crowded close fascination, replacing any lingering fears about being replaced. "She's so tiny," Noah exclaimed. "Was I that tiny signier?" Emma told him, "and much louder." "Can I hold her?" Noah asked. With careful supervision, Noah held his baby sister, his face serious with responsibility. "Hi, Sarah. I'm your big brother Noah. I'll teach you everything, how to sing silly songs and train crows and make Emma laugh when she's being too serious." Emma took her turn next her hold, confident from years of caring for Noah. "I'll keep you safe," she whispered to the baby. That's what big sisters do. Watching her 4 children together, for they were all hers, all theirs, all family, Margaret felt a completeness she'd never imagined possible. From the ashes of multiple tragedies, they'd built something extraordinary. "Look what love built," she said to Samuel, who wrapped his arm around her. "A fortress," he agreed. "A family that nothing can break." The town celebrated Sarah's birth like a collective grandparent. Gifts poured in, from practical cloth diapers to elaborate hand-carved cradles. But the most precious gift came from an unexpected source. Tobias Martin the hermit, who'd barely spoken to anyone before the Carters came, arrived with something wrapped in old leather. Inside was a journal, pages yellow with age. "This was my daughter's," he said gruffly. "She died of scarlet fever 40 years ago. Would have been about Emma's age now. Been saving it for... well, didn't know what I was saving it for until now." Emma accepted the journal with trembling hands. "Mr. Tobias, I can't. You can, and you will. Fill it with your family's story. The real one, not the one people might tell later. Write it all down, the pain and the joy, the fear and the love. Especially the love." That night, as Sarah slept in her cradle and Noah curled in his bed, Emma began writing in the journal. She started with the desert, with the promise she'd made to her dying mother. She wrote about Samuel appearing like a miracle, about Margaret's frozen heart thawing about a town that became family. Margaret found her writing by lamplight, tears streaming down her face. "It's happy crying," Emma assured her. "I'm writing about how you chose us, how Papa Samuel bled for us, how this whole town stood up and said we belonged here." "What will you title it?" Margaret asked. Emma thought for a moment. "The family we chose, a story of love beyond blood." As winter deepened, bringing the ranch into a season of rest and reflection, the Carter family settled into their new configuration. Sarah was an easy baby, content to be passed from arm to arm, surrounded by love. Noah composed increasingly elaborate songs for her. Emma documented every milestone in her journal. The fear that had driven them for so long, fear of Vincent, of separation, of not being real family, had finally dissipated. In its place grew something stronger certainty. They were Carters. They were family. They were home. One evening, as snow fell softly outside and the family gathered around the fireplace, Noah asked, "Papa Samuel, are we rich?" Samuel considered. "Not in money, son." "Why?" Timothy Carson said, "We must be the richest family in Silver Creek because we have each other and the whole town loves us." "Then yes," Samuel said, pulling all his children close. "We're the richest people in the world." Emma looked around at her family. Margaret nursing Sarah, Samuel helping Noah with his letters, the fire casting golden light on faces she loved more than life itself. She thought about their parents, hoping they could somehow see this, see that their children hadn't just survived, but thrived. "We made it, Mama," she whispered to the memory. "We found our family. We kept our promise." Outside, the snow continued to fall, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, covering the scars of old battles and pain. But inside, warmth and love created an unbreakable circle, a chosen family that had faced the worst and emerged stronger. They were home. They were whole. They were family. And that was everything. 5 years had passed since that snowy November night when Sarah was born, and the Carter Ranch had become something of a legend in the territory, not for its size or wealth, but for what it represented, a place where broken hearts learned to beat again, where chosen family proved stronger than blood. The occasion that brought everyone together was Emma's wedding. At 18, Emma Carter stood in the room that had once belonged to Benjamin, now transformed into a bride's preparation chamber. Margaret fixed the last pin in Emma's hair, her mother's pins salvaged from the wreckage years ago and polished to shine like new. "You're the most beautiful bride Silver Creek has ever seen," Margaret said, her voice thick with emotion. "Mama Margaret, you've been crying all morning," Emma laughed, turning to embrace the woman who'd chosen to love her when loving seemed impossible. "Happy tears," Margaret assured her, "the best kind." Through the window, they could see the ranch transformed. Tables stretched across the yard laden with food, contributed by every family in town. Wildflowers, Noah's particular contribution, decorated every surface in explosive color. The old barn had been cleared and strung with lanterns for dancing. And under the massive oak tree that Samuel had planted, the day the adoption was finalized, an arch of roses waited. Timothy Carson stood there already, no longer the gangly 17-year-old who'd first defended the Carters, but a man of 22, who'd proven himself worthy of Emma's fierce heart. He'd taken over his father's store, expanded it, and used the profits to help other orphan children find homes. It was this last part that had won Emma completely, his understanding that family could be created, not just inherited. "Ready?" Samuel asked from the doorway, resplendent in his best suit, though his eyes were suspiciously wet. "Papa Samuel, not you too," Emma said, but she was crying now as well. "You'll always be my little girl," he said gruffly. "The brave one who stood up to Vincent, who protected Noah, who helped us remember how to love. You saved us first," Emma reminded him. In every way that mattered, Noah burst in, now 11 and tall for his age, still irrepressibly cheerful. "Sarah's escaped again. She's in the chicken coop, teaching the hens her new song." 5-year-old Sarah had inherited Noah's gift for chaos and joy in equal measure. She had Samuel's steady eyes, Margaret's auburn hair, and a spirit entirely her own. She also had the fierce protection of her older siblings, who'd taught her that family meant choosing to love each other every single day. "I'll get her," Noah said, then paused. "Emma, you look like Mama, our first Mama, but also like Mama Margaret, like both mothers at once." It was so perfectly Noah, seeing not division, but multiplication of love, that Emma pulled him close, not caring about wrinkles to her dress. "You're the best brother anyone could ask for," she told him. "Better than Benjamin?" Noah asked, and it was a measure of how far they'd all come that the name brought smiles, not pain. "Different than Benjamin," Emma said. "He was Margaret and Samuel's first miracle. We're their second. Sarah's their third. All miracles, all perfect in our own ways." The ceremony itself was simple but profound. Reverend Mills, now gray-haired but still passionate, spoke about love that transcended conventional boundaries. The entire town served as witnesses. Mrs. Patterson, who'd become like a grandmother to all the Carter children. Hans Muller, still massive and protective. Doc Morrison, with his adopted twin boys, now strapping young men themselves. Even Tobias Martin, no longer a hermit, but the town's unofficial grandfather, teaching silly songs to a new generation. When Timothy kissed his bride, 5-year-old Sarah's voice rang out clear. "Does this mean Emma's leaving us?" "Never," Emma assured her, kneeling down in her wedding dress to meet Sarah's eyes. "I'm just adding to our family. Timothy's going to build a house right on the next hill. I'll see you every day." "Promise?" Sarah asked, and everyone heard the echo of another promise made by another big sister in far more desperate circumstances. "I promise," Emma said solemnly. "Family stays close, no matter what." The reception was a testament to what the Carters had built. 3 more families had formed from the inspiration of their story-orphaned children, taken in by townspeople who'd learned that love didn't require blood connection. These children ran wild with Sarah, their laughter the sound of healing made audible. As the sun set, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, Samuel stood to make a toast. The crowd quieted, glasses raised. "6 years ago," he began, "Margaret and I were dying inside. We'd lost our son, thought we'd lost our reason for living. Then God sent us 2 gifts from the desert, Emma and Noah, who needed us as much as we needed them." He paused, looking at his family, Margaret holding Sarah, Noah grinning beside them, Emma radiant with Timothy's arm around her. "They taught us that family isn't about replacing what's lost. It's about adding to love's story. Benjamin isn't forgotten. He's part of our foundation. Emma and Noah's parents aren't erased. They're honored in how we raise their children. And today, as Emma starts her own family, we don't lose a daughter. We gain a son." He raised his glass higher. "To chosen family, to love that multiplies, to the truth that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as deepest sorrow. To family," the crowd echoed, and the word carried across the valley like a benediction. Later, as couples danced in the lantern-lit barn, Emma found a moment alone with Margaret and Samuel. The three of them stood apart, watching Noah teaching Sarah and the other children his latest ridiculous dance, something involving hopping like rabbits while singing about flying pigs. "Thank you," Emma said simply, "for everything, for choosing us when choosing hurt, for fighting for us when fighting seemed impossible, for showing us that love isn't limited by loss." "You saved us just as much," Margaret said. "Maybe more," Samuel nodded. "You and Noah brought us back to life, gave us purpose again. Sarah exists because you two taught us our hearts could still grow." They stood together, this unlikely family forged in desert heat and tempered by trials, watching their loved ones celebrate under stars that had witnessed their entire journey. "Do you think they can see us?" Emma asked suddenly. "Our parents, Benjamin." "I think Margaret said carefully that love like theirs, like ours, doesn't end with death. It becomes part of the fabric of everything. Every kind act, every chosen family, every child saved, because our story inspired someone that's them living on." As if to punctuate her words, Sarah's laughter rang out pure and unrestrained. She was trying to teach Tobias Martin her new song, something about butterflies wearing boots. The old man, who'd been silent for 40 years before the Carters arrived, sang along with gusto, his weathered face transformed by joy. "Look what love built," Samuel said, echoing Margaret's words from years before. "A legacy," Timothy added, joining them. "The whole territory knows the story now. The children who walked out of the desert and found home. The couple who chose love over loss. The town that stood together against evil." "It's bigger than that," Emma said, her writer's eye seeing the fuller picture. "It's proof that families can be made, not just born. That communities can choose compassion over convention. That love isn't diminished by sharing, it's multiplied." The dancing continued late into the night. At one point, the band played a slow waltz, and Samuel led Margaret onto the floor. They moved together with the practiced ease of long partnership, but also with renewed vitality, raising Emma and Noah, welcoming Sarah, building this extended family of choice. It had given them a second youth, a second chance at joy. Noah danced with Sarah, lifting his little sister and spinning her until she squealed with delight. Around them, other pairs moved adopted children with their chosen parents, blood families strengthened by witnessing chosen ones, a community that had learned love's true definition. Emma danced with Timothy, but her eyes followed her family. In her journal now, 3 volumes long, she'd written their story in all its complexity. The terror and triumph, the grief and grace, the way broken people had fitted together to create something whole. As the evening wound down, Noah stood to sing not one of his silly songs this time, but something new, something that made everyone stop and listen. From desert sand to fertile ground, from broken hearts to love unbound, we walked through fire, we walked through fear, and found our family waiting here. Not born of blood, but born of choice, we learned to sing with common voice. And though the storms may come again, we'll stand together now and then. For family isn't what you're given, it's what you choose. It's how you're living. It's standing up. When standing's hard, it's choosing love, though you've been scarred. We are the Carters. We are the chosen. We are the family love has woven. There wasn't a dry eye when he finished. Sarah ran to him, throwing her small arms around his waist. "That's us," she declared. "We're the chosen family. All of us." Noah agreed, gesturing to encompass not just the Carters, but the entire gathered community. Every single one. As the celebration finally ended and guests began departing, the Carters stood together one last time before Emma left for her wedding night. They formed a circle, as they'd done that first night they'd prayed together. But now the circle was larger. Emma and Timothy, Margaret, and Samuel, Noah, and Sarah. "Whatever comes," Samuel said, "we face it together." Always together, they agreed in unison. Emma looked at each face, memorizing this moment. From that terrified girl carrying her dying brother through the desert, to this a bride surrounded by more family than she'd ever dreamed possible. The journey had been harder than anyone should have to endure, but it had led here to this abundance of love. Our parents would be so happy, she told Noah, who nodded. They are happy, he said with complete certainty. They sent us here. This was always meant to be our family. Later, after Emma and Timothy had departed for their new home, just over the hill, close enough to see the ranch's lights, far enough for privacy, Margaret and Samuel sat on their porch, with Noah and Sarah asleep against them. "We did it," Margaret said softly. "We built a family from ashes." "We did more than that," Samuel replied. "We proved that love isn't limited by loss, that hearts can grow new chambers, that choosing to love despite the risk, despite the pain, is always worth it." The stars wheeled overhead, the same stars that had witnessed Emma and Noah's desperate flight, their rescue, their transformation from orphans to chosen children to pillars of their community. And in the silence of the night, if you listened carefully, you could hear it, the sound of a family breathing together, hearts beating in harmony, love multiplying with each passing moment. The Carters had become more than a family. They'd become living proof that sometimes the greatest gifts come wrapped in the deepest sorrow, that families can be forged from choice rather than chance, and that love, true love, chosen love, fought for love, never really ends. It just keeps growing, keeps choosing, keeps building something beautiful from whatever pieces it's given. The family was complete. The family was forever. The family was home. And that truth would echo through generations, inspiring other broken hearts to risk love again, other orphan souls to believe in belonging, other communities to choose compassion over convention. This was their legacy. Love multiplies. Family is chosen. Hope lives always. The end.